Good morning, everyone. I'm Charles Allen. I'm the Ward 6 Council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment. Today is Thursday, October 16th, 2025, and we are meeting both in room 120 of the historic John A. Wilson building as well as on the Zoom virtual platform. The time is now 9:40 a.m., and I'm calling to order this public hearing of the committee. Today, the committee will be considering three bills. Bill 26-244, the Micromobility Fire Safety Standards Act of 2025, Bill 26-245, the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Amendment Act of 2025, and Bill 26-246, the Automated Curbside Management System Amendment Act of 2025. I introduced Bill 26-244, the Micromobility Fire Safety Standards Act of 2025, on May 6th of this year, along with Councilors Fruman, Robert White, Pinto, Bonds, and Henderson. This bill was referred to this committee a week later on May 13th, and the bill would require that micromobility devices and batteries manufactured, distributed, sold, leased, or rented in the district be certified by a third-party organization to meet applicable safety standards. The third-party organization providing that certification, what the bill refers to as a certification body, must be recognized by OSHA as a nationally recognized testing laboratory and must also have received the ISO IEC 17065 accreditation from an independent accreditation body that is a member of the International Accreditation Forum. This bill requires that micromobility devices and their components be certified to three safety standards: UL 2849, the standard for electrical systems in e-bikes; UL 2272, a standard for electrical systems in personal e-mobility devices, such as a scooter; and UL 2271, the standard for batteries in light electric vehicle applications. Electric bikes, electric scooters, and other electric micromobility devices provide residents and visitors with a convenient alternative to personal vehicle use and have proven to be extremely popular in the district. However, as electric mobility devices have become increasingly common, so too have incidents where lithium-ion batteries that power them experience a phenomenon called a thermal runaway, which can result in smoke, fire, and emissions of harmful gases or even explosions. Now, we've seen hundreds of these cases nationally, and a handful have happened here in the district. In February 2024, a scooter battery caused a fire in an apartment building in Northwest DC, which tragically, we had one resident who was killed and 23 others displaced. In May of last year, we also had an e-bike battery that caused a fire in a row home in Southeast, displacing a family of four. So to be clear, I am a huge supporter of micromobility devices in the district. They give residents and visitors a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to moving around our city, but we also have to make sure that they are safe. Requiring that micromobility devices meet the prevailing national safety standard before being offered for sale or rental is just a simple, common sense step to improve the safety of these devices and allow residents and visitors to enjoy them for years to come. On Bill 26-245, this is the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Amendment Act of 2025. That was introduced on May 6th by myself, along with Councilmembers Henderson and Parker. It was referred to the committee on May 13th, 2025. Demand for food delivery services has grown significantly in recent years. The food delivery market in the United States more than doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic, when delivery services became an attractive option for residents who were ill, elderly, or simply preferred the convenience of home delivery. And that demand has remained high. And while everyone might like getting their hamburger, pizza, or sushi delivered to their doorstep, this change in consumer activity is also resulting in increasingly crowded streets, leading to concerns about safety and congestion. An innovative solution that could help cities meet this demand for food deliveries while reducing roadway congestion are personal delivery devices, or PDDs. They're small, semi-autonomous robots designed to transport deliveries short distances. These devices have the potential to complete that last mile delivery and operate on sidewalks, taking cars off the roadways, especially for shorter trips, and reducing carbon emissions and supporting local businesses. The Personal Delivery Device Act of 2018 established a PDD program administered by the District Department of Transportation, or DDOT, limiting the weight of PDDs to 90 pounds. However, since the establishment of the PDD program in 2018, various companies have developed new models that actually exceed the 90-pound weight limit. The weight limit set in the original legislation now presents a barrier to the introduction of these newer models. As a point of comparison, at least 12 states allow PDDs that exceed 500 pounds in weight. Another 7 states have approved PDDs that have not established a weight limit at all in statute. To more closely align with the majority approach taken in other jurisdictions, the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Amendment Act of 2025 would increase the maximum weight to no more than 275 pounds, excluding their cargo. And finally, I introduced Bill 26-246, the Automated Curbside Management System Amendment Act of 2025, on May 13th, along with Councilmembers Nadeau, Henderson, and Lewis George, and the bill was referred to the committee on the same day. Bill 26-246 would require that DDOT establish an automated curbside management system that uses technology to obtain and transmit real-time information of curbside use and it automatically bills drivers for the time spent at the curb. To make this simple, just think of this like Easy Pass for parking at the curb rather than having to manually pay for a parking space using a kiosk. The program would recognize your vehicle, connect that with an account you've set up, and just bill you. It would also detect when someone uses the curb without making a manual payment or setting up an account for automatic payment and ticket or invoice them accordingly. More specifically, the bill requires that DDOT establish a smart loading zone program. This program would focus on implementing an automated curbside management system for spaces reserved for picking up and dropping off passengers or loading and unloading goods. It would be a specific application of the automated curbside management system in the context of loading zones, which we know is a pressure point to deliveries for businesses. The bill allows, but does not require, DDOT to use dynamic pricing system that can adjust parking rates based on demand. And finally, the bill requires that DDOT, for any procurement related to implementation of the bill, prioritize applicants whose automated curbside management technology can provide additional functionality, such as automated enforcement of moving vehicles. Together, these changes in law will facilitate a more seamless access to the curb, reduce traffic congestion, and allow for more efficient deliveries. Each of these bills, in some way or another, asks us to think about how we can harness technological solutions and innovation to improve how efficiently and safely people and goods can move around the district. And I'm looking forward to today's discussion. If we have any of my colleagues that join us, I'll certainly turn to them for any opening statements. A couple of comments about today's format. We have public witnesses that will be testifying. So those that are on their own behalf will have 3 minutes to testify. A&C commissioners or those testifying on behalf of an organization will have 5 minutes. If there are multiple witnesses testifying on behalf of the same organization, only one witness will have the full 5 minutes to testify. The other witnesses will each have 3 minutes. We'll be using a timer to keep us all on schedule. And for witnesses testifying in person, when I call your name, please take a seat up at the table. And if you are on Zoom, please look for the prompt to accept the promotion to a panelist. After finishing your testimony, please remain seated or in the Zoom so that we can ask you some questions. And for anyone interested in submitting testimony for the record, the committee will accept written testimony through the council's hearing management system through October 30th, 2025, and you can do so at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Before we turn to our witnesses as well, this is, I think, a fairly historic and momentous occasion because I don't think we've ever had 3 DDOT directors in one hearing. So I'm very excited that we have DDOT leadership, both past and present, that are here. And I think it actually speaks to the quality of DDOT leadership we've had over the years of folks who are innovators, stay in this space, and are really leaders in helping us think through how we move around our city and how we manage our spaces efficiently. So I'm really glad to see all of that. Even though you're all now sitting together, maybe we'll do like a photo op at some point and force you all to sit together and take a picture. All right, so with that, let me start calling our public witnesses. Again, it's going to be a hybrid format, so we got some people joining on Zoom and some in person. So I have Chuck Ludlam, who's a public witness, who I think is joining us via Zoom. Jeff Marudian, CEO of UL Standards and Engagement, who is here in person.
Are you unmuted?
And Megan Housewright, who's Government Affairs Lead with UL Solutions, who's also here in person. All right, I think what we're going to do is break this up into 3 panels because I think that it kind of tracks with the way the legislations are laying out. So, Mr. Ludlam, how about I turn to you to kick us off on Zoom, and then I'll turn to our in-person panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chuck Ludlam. The key issue regarding the e-bike battery bill is how it will prevent an e-bike battery fire in a high-rise, in an apartment, a condo, or a co-op. I'm here because I live on the 7th floor of a co-op in Cathedral Heights. An e-bike battery fire is actually a series of violent explosions with shrapnel and toxic gases. The New York Fire Department says that if there's an e-bike battery fire, run. Do not make any attempt to put it out. Mr. Chairman, you have just mentioned the high-rise battery fire on Peabody Street in Northwest. An e-bike battery fire in a high-rise could lead to mass casualties and millions of dollars in damages. Mr. Chairman, you are leading on this issue. Congratulations and thank you. However, your bill needs to be much more focused on an e-bike battery fire in a high-rise. I served for 33 years as legal counsel to House and Senate committees on the Hill, so I've provided you with a complete rewrite of your bill. I'm sorry, that's what I've done. The single most important of these amendments is to require that all e-bike batteries be stored and charged in UL 1487 compliant containers. This is the new standard, February 10th, 2025, which was finalized after your bill was introduced, so it's not mentioned in your bill. These containers are ruggedized to the point where if there is a battery explosion, it can contain it. The value of this is obvious. The next two witnesses are from Underwriters Laboratory. You can ask them, should all e-bike batteries be stored and charged in UL 1487 containers when they are not in use or when they're being charged? To be clear, these containers are very expensive because they're so ruggedized. So high-rise buildings may wish to consider an alternative, constructing a charging or storage shed for e-bike batteries away from the building. The key is to keep the batteries out of the building. With or without your bill, failure of a high-rise to comply with UL 1487 would constitute a failure of due diligence, which would mean that they would be suffering punitive damages and not just compensatory damages. The failure of due diligence rises in a Surfside condo collapse issue. The condo collapse has led insurance companies to demand that apartments and co-ops notify them of risk and take steps to reduce risk. Complying with the UL standards, all of them, is crucial to meeting this standard. What we can do here is if you set the standard, then the insurance companies will be actually an enforcement mechanism to get them adopted widely in the market. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look forward to working with you on this important legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ludlam. And please don't worry at all about sending us what we call a red line. We appreciate it. It's the point of having a hearing is to get that type of feedback. Unlike some of our friends down the block in a domed building that don't hold hearings on legislation impacting the district, we do. And so it's a very helpful and important part. So thank you very much. And please stick around because I've got some questions for you in just a moment. Next, let me turn to Jeff Marudian, who's the CEO of UL Standards and Engagement, as well as former DDOT director. Mr. Marudian.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Allen, members of the committee and staff. My name is Jeff Marudian. I am the president and CEO of UL Standards and Engagement. UL Standards and Engagement is a nonprofit 501c4 safety advocacy organization that translates safety science into action through standards development, partnerships, and advocacy. Our organization has a deep-rooted legacy in safety with a portfolio of over 1,700 standards and guidance documents, including more than 80 standards that aim to reduce the risks associated with lithium-ion batteries and the devices that rely on them. UL standards are written and published in collaboration with technical experts from a variety of interest categories, including industry, academia, government, retail, and consumers. In fact, the average American home has 125 devices that meet UL standards. I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the sponsors of the Micromobility Fire Safety Standards Act of 2025. As written, this measure will help reduce risk of death or injury due to lithium-ion batteries that are widely used in e-bikes and e-scooters today. These types of batteries are everywhere, and they are here to stay. They have powered numerous technologies, including e-mobility devices, that have enhanced how we live, work, and play. But lithium-ion batteries can present serious safety hazards to users and first responders if the battery is poorly manufactured, counterfeit, damaged, or improperly charged. And although these incidents are rare, we are seeing an alarming increase in fires due to these factors. One of the primary risks related to lithium-ion batteries is known as thermal runaway. Thermal runaway is a phenomenon in which lithium-ion cells enter into an uncontrollable self-heating state. This can result in extremely high temperatures, violent cell venting, smoke, and fire. And unlike traditional fires, lithium-ion battery fires can become deadly within 20 seconds, far faster than the 3 minutes it typically takes for a traditional fire to spread. And beyond impacting just the single user, in many cases, these incidents have caused serious harm to residential buildings. We've seen this in multiple news stories here in the district. In August, as mentioned, 4 people were displaced after a lithium-ion battery went into thermal runaway in a 2-story row house in Ward 5. And unfortunately, last year, an e-scooter caught fire, taking the life of 1 person and displacing 23 people in Ward 4. And these are just some of the stories here in the district. We have seen similar incidents in communities across the country, and in far too many cases resulting in fatalities. These incidents are growing because of the widespread availability of low-cost, uncertified lithium-ion batteries and limited regulations to ensure consumer safety. We know that nationwide, despite this risk and increasing number of reported incidents, more than half of e-mobility owners do not realize that their devices are powered by lithium-ion batteries, nor are they aware of the inherent risks associated with them. The Micromobility Fire Safety Standards Act of 2025 is a big step toward improving safety for everyone. It emphasizes strong standards instead of blanket bans, will help ensure that these devices can be used safely in our city. The bill incorporates the accredited American National Standards for e-bikes and e-mobility devices by reference, UL 2849, UL 2272, and UL 2271. When an e-bike or e-mobility device is certified to a UL standard, buyers are assured that the product's batteries, chargers, electrical systems, and more have been designed and tested to withstand conditions that the device may encounter during normal use. Being tested and certified to a UL standard also reduces the risks of death, injury, and damages. The good news is that we've already seen a reduction in fatalities in places like New York City, where similar legislation passed in 2023. Passing this measure would position the district alongside a growing number of states and cities who have adopted this language already, and several more who are actively taking up similar measures. I want to again thank you, this committee, and the bill sponsors for your dedication to addressing this emerging issue, and welcome the opportunity to follow up with you on any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And next, let me turn to Megan Housewright, who's Government Affairs Lead with UL Solutions.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Allen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in strong support of this legislation. So I am Megan Housewright, Government Affairs for UL Solutions, which is a global safety science company with decades of experience testing and certifying lithium-ion batteries and the products that they power. Our work has been instrumental in shaping the safety practices and the industry standards for e-bikes, e-scooters, and other personal e-mobility products. So one point of clarification, so UL Solutions performs testing and certification, but we don't develop standards. We contribute through applied science-based expertise, and we participate in the standards development process. But as my colleague CEO of ULSE has been mentioning, they are the standards developer. So turning to the bill, as Washingtonians increasingly embrace cleaner, efficient, and more sustainable forms of transportation, like e-bikes, we have to make sure that they're safe, and especially in a city as densely populated as DC. So this bill is about protecting residents from the real dangers posed by unsafe lithium-ion batteries. Fires attributed to these devices have devastated homes, injured people, and even taken lives across the country and around the world. So DC Fire and EMS has witnessed this, responding to fires in all 4 quadrants caused by a micromobility device. New York City alone has investigated over 1,000 fires linked to these devices in since 2019, resulting in hundreds of injuries and even dozens of fatalities. So this is why we commend your leadership here and the role that DC has taken in requiring strong safety standards and setting a clear expectation that if you're going to sell or distribute a micromobility device here in DC, it has to be certified by a nationally recognized testing laboratory to the leading safety standards. So I just want to quickly explain why that matters. There's a pretty big difference between simply tested, a product that's been tested, and a product that's been certified. So testing might mean that a single sample has been tested, but certification, on the other hand, means that a product has been thoroughly evaluated to a standard. It's not just the lab testing results, but it's how it's designed, how it's built, and whether that product meets those standards on an ongoing basis. So it comes down to who's making the decision around compliance and those test results. Are they competent, consistent, and impartial? So this bill rightly requires certification by a nationally recognized testing laboratory, or an NRTL. So what that means, these are independent organizations that have been recognized by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration to conduct both testing and certification. So NRTLs meet the OSHA requirements, which include doing factory surveillance. So several times a year, the certifier makes an unannounced visit to a factory to make sure and verify that no changes have been made to that product since it was originally certified. So NRTL certification can also simplify the enforcement process because it provides a clear, verifiable mark for an enforcement official to look at. And so there's no need to review test reports or vet unfamiliar laboratories to understand if the product meets the standards. And this shifts the burden from verifying the compliance from the officials to the certifiers and makes oversight more efficient and more reliable. So we also commend this bill for referencing the right standards: 2849, 2272, and 2271. These are the American national standards for these products. By requiring certification to these standards by a nationally recognized testing laboratory, this isn't just checking the box. You're protecting DC residents, first responders, and neighborhoods from preventable tragedies. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak in strong support for this bill. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Ludlam, I might start with some questions for you, and then I'll turn back to our folks that are here in the hearing room. Again, I really appreciate your testimony as well as providing the constructive feedback so that we can take a look at some of the recommendations. Your focus has been on our high-rise buildings. So we have a lot of those in DC, obviously, residential buildings where we're trying to think about how do we keep that safety standard for our residents. And your recommendation again is that we need to add in to this legislation a fourth standard, UL 1487. And I want to try to get a sense of maybe the scope of your recommendation for us. And kind of what I'm getting at is your focus is on residential buildings. We do have a large number of high-rise commercial buildings, for example. Is your recommendation, we have plenty of workplaces where people bring their own personal e-scooters or e-bikes. Oftentimes a building might have like a bike storage room in the basement, but oftentimes not. They bring it right up to their workplace. Would your recommendation be this should apply both to residential and commercial?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, high rises are the threat. Obviously, if you have a fire in a single family detached dwelling or a row house, you may get deaths. The toxic smoke alone may kill people, and it can do a tremendous amount of damage. But if it's in a high rise, and I'm on the 7th floor of a high rise, if this starts in the basement or the garage, the odds that I can get out are dodgy. And you could have dozens of deaths. You could have 100 deaths. You could have tens of millions of dollars in damages. That is where the risk is. And that's why I'm focused on containment containers. And if they can contain them, then they could have batteries inside the building. If they don't have containment containers under the UL 1487, then the batteries would have to be outside the building somehow.
Okay. Would you distinguish, let's say we went down this road and we have these containers. Would your recommendation be those containers have to be maintained on a first floor, or those containers could be maintained, for example, in your own unit on the 7th floor if you had that standard container?
I don't know whether you need to get into that in the legislation. Obviously, it would be better if it was on any floor, and I don't think it's especially better if it's on the first floor or the 7th floor. The containment is the key.
Okay. All right. I'm going to throw a devil's advocate question at you. Obviously, in a high rise, I could actually find any number of hazards. I could have somebody who comes in with a space heater. And we every year see a lot of fires that take place from people that plug in a space heater in the winter. It ends up catching fire. We have a lot of displacements. Unfortunately, we'll have injuries and death too. How do I distinguish this hazard, which again, I agree with you, there's a hazard, which is why we have the bill in front of us. But how would I distinguish in a high rise this specific hazard versus a hazard like a space heater or a toaster oven or other things that, if they're not at the right standard, can also pose risk?
A lithium battery fire is an explosion. Each cell of the battery explodes separately. And every time they explode, they send off fireworks and shrapnel with toxic smoke. Now, you may have an air fryer that explodes, but it isn't going to have this impact, and it isn't going to be instantaneous. And it isn't going to be something that cannot be fought with conventional fire fighting techniques. The New York Fire Department says for you to run. So I think it's an exceptional problem. I don't think it's unique in the possibility that it's an electrical device. Which, I mean, a refrigerator could catch fire. I mean, anything could catch fire, but it is uniquely toxic and uniquely dangerous.
Okay, so you believe there is a uniqueness to the risk posed by this fired explosion that is distinct from potentially other hazards that we might find in a household?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's
No,
helpful.
I think it's very obvious that that's true.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I wanted to ask you just a little bit too, just from a condo perspective, to the extent you're willing to share, could you just talk about how is your condo managed, for example? I'm assuming you have a condo board of some type of owners association. Has the board implemented specific safety or disclosure requirements related to e-bike battery storage?
I'm working on it.
Got it. Please let me know how it goes. I'd be fascinated to find out. Okay, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your leadership because I mean, we need to prevent these fires in a high rise. I mean, I don't know, this could be as bad as 9/11 at the Pentagon in terms of casualties and damages. I mean, you get a 10 or 12-story building filled with people. You know, condos and co-ops tend to often be filled with somewhat older people. I mean, this is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful. And I look forward to following up. And I know we can reach back out to you as well
Thank
to
you.
keep talking too. So let me turn to our UL representatives. All right. So, and actually, I'm not sure who I direct it to. So I'm just going to direct it to both of you. And then you help me figure out who jumps in on the answer here. So as I understand the testimony, and I might be at risk of oversimplifying things here, but our product safety certification consists of two major components as I get it. The safety standard for the product itself, and then the requirements around the organization that test or certify the products against that standard. So an organization can focus on developing new standards, or they can focus on testing and certification, or they can do both. With that background in mind, can you help me understand the difference between UL standards and engagement and UL solutions?
Sure. So your explanation, I think, is exactly right. There are standards developers, of which UL Standards and Engagement is one, and there are companies that test and certify to a set of standards, of which UL Solutions is one. They are exclusive functions for us. Other companies, other nonprofits are structured differently, but that is the way that the UL model operates. And so our organization, UL Standards and Engagement, sets the standards. We work with a number of technical advisors, about 4,000 across the world, in a number of product categories, but we do not do any of the testing. UL Solutions does testing and certification across the globe.
Got it. Okay. So, and you kind of hinted at this, does UL Solutions test or certify products to standards other than those developed by UL?
We do, yes.
Okay. All right. The proposed legislation also requires that a certification body must both, one, be recognized as a nationally recognized testing laboratory, and two, have received ISO IEC 17065 accreditation. What are the differences between those two standards for a certification body?
Sure. They're not differences, and in fact, they're reinforcing. So
Okay.
something that we've seen other jurisdictions do when they are developing legislation for micromobility is to require testing or certification by an accredited testing laboratory, and then defining that as 17025, 17065, or a nationally recognized testing laboratory. Those are different designations. 17025 is a standard for accrediting test labs. Is the equipment calibrated correctly? Do you have the right technicians who can run the tests, et cetera? Versus 17065 is a standard for certification bodies: impartiality, consistency, competency to do that. The NRTL sort of sits on top. It is an OSHA program that has both is looking at the competency for an organization like UL Solutions of the testing side and the certification side. So it is a little bit of a redundancy for NRTL and 17065, but it stresses the importance of the certification versus just testing, which is not sort of sufficient for the hazard.
Got it. Okay. We got some feedback on the legislation suggesting we should amend it actually so that a certification body only has to be nationally recognized testing laboratory or receive ISO IEC 17065 accreditation, but not both. It's possible we might hear the same recommendation from Department of Transportation. You kind of described just a moment ago as that they're not too different, they're actually complementary to one another. What would be the downsides of that approach if we were to separate it and say either this or that? You don't have to be both.
Yeah, I think so. Here's the challenge. If it is a 17065 accreditation, if you look at that standard, it is general on what a certification body needs to be able to demonstrate. Again, getting at that impartiality and competency. And so, for example, ISO 17065 requires the certifier to have market surveillance capabilities if that is a program requirement. So within the OSHA world, that is a program requirement that you do market surveillance, actually factory surveillance, and do it in a particular way. But if it's left very general, then you're not, which 17065 would be more general without sort of further specifications upon it, then you lose the details which are important for the safety of the product.
Okay. One of the things I always try to think about when we're doing legislation, but the risk is the same if we're doing them by regulation as well. But when we are specific in our language of certain standards, so when I write into the legislation, UL standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what is my risk from your perspective of a year or two from now? You update your standards and you might issue a new standard number, but in legislation, I've tied it to a specific standard. The same concern could happen from a regulatory standpoint as well. So an agency then has to go back and issue new regulations. But what are your thoughts around that? Am I tying my hands by specifically naming very specific UL standard numbers or not?
No, you're not. In some cases, if the standard gets updated, it would be incorporated into the existing framework. So no, you're definitely not tying your hands to any one particular specification today.
Okay. But as we heard Mr. Ludlam share, after we'd introduced the legislation, for example, you created a new standard for the storage devices. Obviously, this is the nature of legislation always. As new information comes out, new things happen, things have to be amended along the way. But that's distinct from updating a standard.
That's correct.
Correct.
So that is it's a different technology entirely, and a more nascent technology. And so that standard is, as Mr. Ludlam acknowledges, is relatively recent, just as of this year. And so as new technologies emerge, as new devices and device categories emerge, we will work with our partners to create standards in those areas. But in other cases where they already exist, we would update them.
Okay. We've walked through a little bit of kind of the approach of should there be both requirements or one or the other. We haven't heard from anybody, though, who's actually said, hey, you've actually picked the wrong standard. You need to be looking at a whole different standard that exists. Is that because such another standard doesn't exist? Is there, in its own way, is there a competing standard to one that you put forward that we should be looking for? Not trying to get you to argue against yourself, but is there a different standard out there? No one's come to us and said you're using the wrong standard, but I want to make sure, again, that we're covering the beachfront here.
So the benefit here is that most of the manufacturers who sell these devices are certifying to the UL standard. These are there are certainly other UL standards that impact parts of these devices, but these are the primary areas where we see the most need from a safety standpoint. And so this legislation, as it's been adopted in New York City and several states currently, mirrors these exact standards, because these are the principal standards that manufacturers, many of whom we have partnered with in developing the standard, have tested their products to.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add one point to that as well, that there may be other standards for these devices in other parts of the world, and those may reflect the regulations within those jurisdictions on like speed of the device or how big the motor can be or something like that. And the UL standards are developed with the context of what is going to address the safety of the products that we're seeing here. So it is I use the phrase American National Standard, which is the sort of the designation that the standard receives. It's like, okay, this is the standard for the US on these products.
Got it. Okay. And last question I want to ask is, I can create the best standards in the world. If there's no enforcement around the standards, I still end up with cheap junk that's going to catch fire. So looking at how your experience in other cities, any advice or thoughts you have around how do we set ourselves up for success in that I might have an online retailer that doesn't care at all about what the UL standards are, and they're just trying to find something that's dirt cheap, and there will be a market for it, and that puts people at risk. So how we create enforceable standards and then how we effectuate that is an important part of this as well. Just any lessons learned you've seen from other cities that have kind of gone through similar conversations and debates?
Sure. Well, I'll say that this became an issue for us in 2023 because the New York City Fire Department reached out to us because they were seeing these issues of counterfeit devices, in particular, those with substandard manufactured batteries, and they helped us identify where the sources of the problem were. We've developed a very solid partnership here with the fire department and other major cities as well. And so this provides the framework for that enforcement. And I think in many cases, it's those enforcement partners, those first responders who are the front lines in knowing where these kinds of devices may be being sold, where they may be, where there may be centers for which they're being distributed either here or in one of our neighboring jurisdictions. So this is not the only step, but it's certainly a very, very important first step.
Got it. Okay. All right. I appreciate it. I don't have any more questions for this panel. I look forward to be able to follow up with all of you, though, as we kind of keep moving this bill forward. Mr. Ludlam, sorry, you had your hand up. You want to jump in real fast?
Just 2 quick points. One is that we're dealing with detachable batteries could go in these containers. There are e-bikes which have integral batteries which are affixed to the bike. That is a terrible risk because there's no way to put it in a container. And second is the Surfside issue will lead to enforcement by the insurance companies of the buildings because they are demanding that the buildings reduce risk. And if the buildings don't reduce risk, like mandate containers, use containers, check the batteries, whatever they want them to do, then they lose their insurance. So you can get a fantastic enforcement mechanism through the private sector, through the Surfside effect.
Interesting. All right. That's helpful. I appreciate it. Well, again, I want to thank all 3 of you for your testimony. We will be following up with all of you on your advice and recommendations here as we look to move this bill forward. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to our second panel of witnesses. So let me call folks up, and I think we have most people in person on this one. Jordan Justice, who's the CEO of Automotus. Gabe Klein, board member and advisor with Automotus, both in person. We have Santiago Lakatos, who's a public witness, who I believe is online via Zoom. And then we have Risa Hirao, who's the president of the DC Association of Beverage Alcohol Wholesalers. And Risa is here in person as well. All right, good morning to you all. And we'll just go in the order that we called everybody out. So Mr. Justice, I'll turn to you first.
There we go. Chairman Allen, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. I'm Jordan Justice, CEO of Automotus. I come before you in strong support of the Automated Curbside Management System Amendment Act of 2025. The legislation presents a necessary and forward-looking step for DC, and cities across the country are already reaping the benefits of this model. We've supported cities including Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Miami, Hoboken, in implementing some of the first automated curb management systems in the world. We've also supported innovative curb programs in Los Angeles, New York, Portland, Toronto, and many other cities that are taking similar actions now to what you are contemplating here to manage the rapid growth in commercial activity that is creating additional traffic, safety hazards, and generally conflict in accessing the curb. Smart loading zones across these jurisdictions have proven to massively reduce traffic and safety hazards while significantly boosting business through increasing turnover at the curb, resulting in increased business for restaurants and retail, as well as more income for gig workers and delivery fleets who are oftentimes limited by their ability to access the curb. In Pittsburgh, smart loading zones essentially eliminated double parking, reducing double parking 97% downtown, while also reducing dwell times and increasing turnover 20 to 70%, which led to an additional measurable improvement in emissions. Philadelphia, within months of launching their smart loading zone program, saw a reduction of around 52% in traffic during rush hour during some of their peak areas in the city. In Hoboken, within the first week of launching their automated enforcement program, they saw a 71% reduction in double parking across bike lanes and bus stops throughout the city. These programs demonstrate that good policy combined with the right technology is able to truly create win-win-win solutions. A win for residents by creating safer, less congested streets, a win for businesses who are able to get more customers in and out of the curb, and a win for city departments who are tasked with managing a much more impacted public right-of-way with fewer resources. I'll take a brief moment now to read a couple quotes from businesses and other communities. This is from Tosh Chambers at the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership. Our businesses really appreciate the smart loading zones and what they've been able to do to help them manage their businesses, especially on streets lined with restaurants. We've seen businesses continue to call for more smart loading zones and smart curbs to help them out. From Vince Perucci, an owner of a local delivery service provider in Philadelphia, he said, "I own and operate a small delivery service company, and the majority of our routes are in the most congested areas of the city. Since the launch of the Smart Zone program, it has led to massive increased delivery efficiencies, minimized any delivery traffic congestion, and most importantly, reduced driver stress and improved our driver safety." These programs are best implemented in partnership with the community, and I'd like to commend the DC government and everybody here on the collaborative approach that's taken to get to this point, including all of the business improvement districts as well. The last thing I'll say is that these programs are critical now, not just for managing the massive increase in commercial activity that we've seen, but also for the autonomous vehicles that are coming to DC next year as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Mr. Klein, also former DDOT director.
Thank you, Chairperson Allen, members of the committee. It's great to be back here and not as the DDOT director getting quizzed. I'm also actually
budget questions for you in just a little
Oh,
bit.
great. We'll have to bring Director Kirschbaum up. So I'm actually a 28-year resident of the district, I realized today. I'm also a 5-time entrepreneur here. 3 of those times we had curbside loading. And so I'm really here sort of with a number of different hats on. I've spent my career helping cities modernize their mobility systems and transportation systems from DC to Chicago, and most recently at the federal level. And I can say with confidence that this bill represents one of the most forward-looking and practical transportation policies that DC can adopt. Particularly as Jordan Justice said, with autonomous vehicles coming next year. And in my opinion, likely a need to double, pick up and drop off zones over the next few years in the district. We've done a tremendous job, I think, over the last 20 years in the district. And when I was running DDOT, we made the parking system digital. We went out on a limb. Nobody had really done that on a large scale. And we said, hey, we're going to bring in a pay-by-phone system. We're going to use a cloud-based system to integrate it with new parking meters. And it's been a game changer. And people were a little nervous. They were like, is this going to work here? Is this going to make sense? Automation makes a lot of sense when you're making people's lives easier. It also made a lot of sense for the DC government. I believe we generated $18 million more the following year. And I actually wrote an article in 2021 in Forbes magazine. It's time to get rid of parking tickets and change how we manage and monetize the curb. I don't know if we get rid of parking tickets because that's how you get rid of double parking. But I will say that with graduated pricing, so with practical policy measures, plus digital technology and AI, it is absolutely amazing what you can do now at the curb to create efficiencies and to change behaviors. So DC is a national leader, whether it's with quick curbs, digital parking. The curb management RFI really brought in the private sector to explore technologies for smart loading and automated billing. I give DDOT a ton of credit for that. And I think that the automated curb management, it's the right time. We're seeing AI hit us left and right, right? From automated vehicles, which happen to be happening at the same time as a lot of cloud-based technology because it started in 2007 with DARPA, to ChatGPT. It's time for us to use AI for good, not to create videos that people can put on TikTok. It's time to empower our government workers. We were talking last night about how, like, being a traffic control officer, giving parking tickets, that's a tough job. And in cities that have started to use this technology, those people move into white collar jobs, those same people. And they actually approve the tickets versus being out on the street getting in arguments with people. So I would say that from the beverage company trying to deliver a keg in Adams Morgan, to Director Kirschbaum and her team, to city coffers. I mean, this is basically a win-win-win. And Jordan, one of the reasons that I am working with these guys is he read my article back in 2021 and called me and said, "This is what we really want to do." And it is AI for good. And with, as you also said, with Zoox coming next year, Waymo, and I will say I've had conversations with some of these companies, and they're like, "This can't come fast enough because we don't have a way to pay for the space that we're using." I just had this conversation a week ago Friday with one of these companies. We don't have a way to pay for the curbside use, and we want to pay. What we don't want is parking tickets. And what we saw back in 2010, when we were revamping loading zones back then and trying to find, like, we were actually doubling them because FedEx and UPS said, we're paying like $500,000 to $800,000 a year in parking tickets. It's not tax deductible, right? We want to get rid of that and pay for what we use. These new companies, whether it be, gig companies, or whether it be Waymo and Zoox, they want to pay for what they use. We have to give them a model to do that, and we have to make it easier because for our people, because this automation and technology is going to come at a faster and faster clip, and the only way we'll get ahead of it is to utilize it. So there's nobody that I know that actually would oppose this, from the small businesses in the city to the Amazons and UPSs, to the folks within the agencies that would like to elevate their own work. I think I'm out of time, so I'll stop. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. Lakatos, who is on Zoom.
Hi, good morning, Councilmember Allen. My name is Santiago Lactos. I'm testifying today in strong support of Bill, pardon me, 26246, the Automated Curbside Management System Amendment Act of 2025. I have been looking forward to this being a bill. So many thanks to you and your colleagues for introducing it. I don't have to tell you that our curbsides are overcrowded. They're in constant demand, especially in commercial areas, but also high density residential areas. Not a day will go by that you won't see a double parked delivery truck or van blocking the road, or a bus lane or a bike lane. Even when loading zones are installed, this happened in my own former single member district. They were often blocked by people who illegally park in them all day. And it takes a while to get DPW out. And even then, maybe they're gone, but they were there for 2 hours and now the UPS truck is blocking the road. This would solve a lot of that problem and is a win for everyone, honestly, unless you're someone who counts on illegally parking in those loading zones. ANC 1B, my former ANC, passed resolution supporting automated curbside enforcement in 2022 and 2024, including a resolution calling for neighborhood loading zones, so on more neighborhood residential streets, with automated curbside enforcement, as well as requesting the use of automated curbside enforcement within the U Street Performance Parking Zone. I'm happy to submit those for the record as well later. I know that, for example, with the vehicular noise Act, I think was the legislation that was proposed. DDOT's response to the bill was that they were interested, but didn't want to get ahead of programs that were already ongoing to test implementation. But I want to kind of preempt that. I'm not saying that that's what they're going to say, by saying that that's not the case, as you've already heard here today. And as noted in the bill's memorandum, there are many cities across the US that have already implemented these systems. I learned today that the system I saw in Philadelphia was Automotus. I noticed that in Rittenhouse Square area when I was visiting there. During my time as an A&C commissioner, I was also recall being told that DDOT's curbside management team had reviewed some of these technologies and that they were testing or were going to test or pilot them. I don't know where that went or if what actually happened, but I encourage you to get some clarity there. And I'm going to give some more implementation related testimony that I will get putting the cart before the horse, but I'm going to do it, is that I would encourage you to consider using these loading zones not just on commercial blocks, but also high density residential areas. With the advent of e-commerce, the amount of deliveries people get each day, residential blocks, especially those with apartment buildings, need this type of dedicated smart loading space. I would also be remiss not to note that the U Street Performance Parking Zone, with its dynamic pricing, dense population, mixed use curbside needs, would fit perfectly for such an automated enforcement program. So, consider that an additional plug. And I would strongly encourage the committee, the full council, to adopt this legislation, and honestly, more importantly, the executive to fund this likely revenue neutral, honestly, revenue positive proposal. So I think I'm out of time. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. And then now let me turn to Ms. Ferraro. Push the buttons, the red light, there you go.
Okay, technologically.
You got this.
challenged. Good morning, Council Member Allen. Thank you for having us here. My name's Risa Hirao. I'm the president for the DC Association of Beverage Alcohol Wholesalers. I'm here on the automated program, and I wanted to kind of share our perspective as a user of loading zones and to kind of give you that perspective, kind of read here what our wholesalers do. Our association is comprised of alcohol, beverage, beer, wine, and spirit wholesalers, all warehoused in the District of Columbia. We're the only distribution industry that still remains in DC. And most of the distribution industries have gone to places like Maryland and beyond. Now, let me read this for you per perspective, because we are different from other delivery operations. We're not a dash and deliver operations, and we require commercial loading zones to be near retail corridors to ensure safe and efficient deliveries. Our members use the trucks of various sizes, ranging from a Sprinter truck to a box truck to freight trucks. And, often the delivery helpers and drivers, they use hand trucks and dollies to handle very heavy material and packages to make sure that the alcohol is safely delivered to the accounts. And multiple stops are necessary after unloading. Delivery of alcohol also has a compliance feature. When they go to the retail account, it's not just dropping and leaving. They have to make sure the alcohol license is in good standing. The payment terms comply with ABRA laws and regulations. They got to check the license validity. All these kind of take time to go beyond, I'm leaving the package, see you later. Now, with all this background on how alcohol wholesalers deliver packages to, not packages, but their alcohol inventory to accounts, I backtracked to this bill, and we have more questions and concerns, and especially about the data here from a user perspective that we'd like more clarity on. And because of this, at this time, we are unable to support the bill, but as we go along with this process, maybe these additional information can help us understand how this program can work in an alcohol delivery setting. Now I want to kind of raise some points. The issue that I have not heard is availability of loading zones. We have talked about the technology. There is the current commercial loading zone program, and we have concerns that there is outright repeal of the program, what will happen to all those loading zones that are in DC that the wholesalers rely upon to deliver? With the repeal, does this mean that those loading zones disappear? Where will they park? There's a lot of input from our members for various loading zones with respect to location, size. We worked with DDOT to make sure that the size of the loading zones, especially on 8th Street and Barracks Row, met certain truck specifications. Also, with the prevalence of streeteries, there is competition to have access to curb cuts. So we have concerns about how many loading zones will be taken offline. What's the shelf life of the loading zones that are under the current system? And under this bill, how many loading zones will be offered? So that's one. The second one is we do have an opportunity for more of a stakeholder engagement. I remember with the initial loading zone program, there were lots of charrettes, lots of community stakeholders. I mean, I work with Mike Ladinsky with Breakthrough Beverage, where we often met with DDOT representatives to talk about what wholesalers need to safely and efficiently deliver alcohol to the many locations in DC. And then the other area that we do have questions on, maybe we can go back and forth, is the data as far as turnover percentage or the success rates that are cited in the reports that have been cited by colleagues here on the program. I would like to find out more what that means from an operational perspective. Turnover doesn't translate very well, and I'd like to understand the common problem that loading zone face for alcohol wholesalers is they come to a parking spot, they'd like to deliver, but there's already a car parked there, often illegally. And, how does this program address that other than, a citation? That car is still there without towing. Wholesalers are still stuck with the old school analog problem, which is needing to find parking, and often it might lead to parking in areas where it might cause challenges. So, I have rest of my comments that I'd like to put in written form, but I'm here for a back and forth, especially from a user perspective. I have concerns that this program focuses more on revenue and enforcement, but not enough on making sure that there are workable parking spaces for trucks, and also the dual use of the loading zones, not loading zones, it's curbside spaces. It says in the bill that it will be shared with passenger vehicles, but fleet vehicles have distinct needs and requirements that are different from passenger vehicles. And I hope that we have an opportunity to discuss these differences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony and for everybody on this panel. We may not be able to get to every part of the back and forth, but I do expect, as I saw heads nodding from your table mates to your left, that there'll be follow-up afterwards too, to kind of really dig into that. We'll do a little bit of that here, but my hunch is there'll be more to come. I also want to clarify that there's nothing in the legislation that repeals our commercial loading zones. So I want to make sure it's layering together those things. But let me start with this. Mr. Justice, you talked about in your testimony in the cities where you have been able to implement some of this technology, Pittsburgh, Hoboken, you're working in Philadelphia, Portland, Toronto, Miami. You've seen that your data tells you that you're seeing a reduction in double parking and even a reduction in that kind of congestion in traffic in terms of where this is spaced. And for folks that aren't familiar, a large share of congestion is actually people circling, looking for parking. So when you better manage your curb space, you actually cut down your congestion as well. But can't be the first time you've heard very reasonable questions and concerns like this around how do you manage this? Our current commercial delivery, all too often, I mean, what I see is those delivery trucks just stop in the middle of the road. On H Street Northeast, they don't even do the curbside travel lane, they just stop in the middle of the road and just throw a cone down in the middle of travel lanes to unload the kegs and all. Like, it's the only reason they're doing it is because there isn't curbside space. Like, those loading zones aren't working for them. And I view this as trying to actually better manage our curbside, both for commercial loading and unloading, passenger drop off, meal delivery, and other passengers. But can you talk about how in other cities that you've already been doing this, you've addressed or worked through some of the very reasonable questions that you heard Ms. Harao kind of walk through, which are real for her members?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Allen. And yeah, Reese, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think in other cities, we've seen a lot of the same concerns that stem from a lot of challenges that you are already facing today. And I think, whenever you're looking at new policies or changes into operations, there's valid concerns in how they might work. But what we've seen in other cities generally is that today most of the public right of way is being misused by a lot of folks, especially in these unmanaged, unmonetized areas like loading zones, where people will pull in if you're maybe an Uber Lyft driver in between rides, or you're going to the doctor's office and there's a loading zone available where you don't have to pay $20 to park off street. People misuse them all the time. So commercial fleets have to stop in a bike lane or a travel lane, and they incur tens of thousands of dollars annually in parking tickets, which, as David mentioned, are not tax deductible. That's a government fine, whereas businesses that are able to pay for parking are able to write that off as a business expense. But the increase in turnover generally from just managing these spaces better and charging for access, where folks are paying for their fair share. And if you're stopping for a few minutes or however long, depending on the rates, it's not a burdensome cost, but it ensures that the spaces are available a lot more often. And that's really what the increased turnover has led to, in addition to reducing searching for parking, reducing traffic caused by double parking. There's generally net benefits, but some of the biggest advocates in these other cities end up being the business and delivery community, because these are very real pain points for them today, whether it be the cost of tickets or the safety hazards of having to get out in the middle of the road and take a dolly across a busy street. Those are very real problems for people, and they end up benefiting, in many cases, most from these types of programs.
Yeah. What I'd like to do, because again, we're not going to solve every part of our back and forth just on the time we have just for this panel here, but I would really like if you could help connect both myself and then Risa directly with some of those counterparts, contemporaries in other cities, so that those types of questions could be better understood and see what their experience has been. Because I don't believe the guy delivering the kegs and cases of beer wants to park in the middle of the road. They just literally don't, like, that curbside management isn't happening in a way that works for them. It puts them at risk, like you say, to have to carry that dolly across travel lanes and traffic. That's a safety hazard. It's annoying to everybody else because it creates congestion and there's just a truck stopped in the middle of the travel lane. So I think the goals are the same, but I do think we need to have our business community be able to hear how is this working in other places and kind of hear what their lived experience has been now that it's been in place, so that they can really dig in and get answers to those, I think, pretty reasonable questions.
I would like to hear more about the inventory too. The way I'm reading this bill, I have fears that the inventory is going south. Like there's a shrinkage in the available spaces where box trucks or freight trucks can park. If you're delivering beer to Tony and Joe's or some restaurants on M Street, where are those loading zones going to be located? I did take a look at the presentation material here, and from an initial reading, it seems like the inventory in these cities might be, I'm not clear of how the locations are determined. So that would be a very good conversation to have. My fear is we have the loading zones under the current system. What's going to happen to those? And how will the space needs be addressed under this proposed bill?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I know that's part of what we want to dig into as well after the hearing. I think we can also acknowledge, though, our loading zones aren't working today. So I don't want us to pretend that it's just working great right now, because we have a lot of those box trucks and trucks have to deliver, just stop in the middle of the roadway. So I don't think we're managing our commercial loading the right way now, or at least it's problematic in many cases. And the reality of being in a city is it would be very rare where I could actually add more curb space. The reality is that's a fairly fixed commodity. What we're trying to do is figure out how do you more efficiently manage that space so that it can serve those different needs. Mr. Klein, did you want to add something to that? And then I want to move on to a couple other questions.
Yep, just one quick comment. I was at a DCST meeting last week, and there's a downtown transportation study happening. They gave some initial data from that, which I don't want to quote because it's not public, but I will say that people were shocked at the amount of space downtown that currently the data shows is just no parking zones. And so I'm very sensitive as a business owner in the district, former business owner, to what you're saying. And I think that, and this is more for DDOT, but I think that the reallocation of space for more loading is going to be important over time, as I said in my testimony. And when we met with FedEx and UPS back in 2009 and 10, when we were working through these same loading zone issues, the mental issue that we faced is that the space wasn't big enough for the trucks. And they asked us to double or triple the size of the loading zones, which we did. And so that type of practical operational conversation needs to happen as well. This technology is really just a tool to manage the space better and to hopefully make it a lot cheaper and easier for you to access the space. But the space constraints themselves, obviously, are a separate issue, which also need to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Mr. Justice, let me ask you, you heard Mr. Lactos kind of talk about high density residential areas. We've talked about this mostly in a commercial setting, but in the cities where this has been deployed, is there a typical use case? Is it predominantly commercial corridors? Has it been in high demand residential corridors? Can you kind of talk about what the experience has been in some other cities?
Generally, I would say density has a high correlation to challenges at the curb and in the right of way. And whether it's commercial or residential, you may have different challenges. You may see more Amazon, Instacart, DoorDash, Grubhub type activity in residential areas than you would see more commercial or beverage delivery, food delivery in higher commercial areas. But I think generally, to Gabe's point as well, commercial activity is just growing rapidly. More and more people are ordering things to be delivered. More and more people are using ride hailing or, in other cities and soon in DC, autonomous vehicles to get around, and generally having accessible space where vehicles can pull over and not block, especially in DC where you have a lot of narrow roadways where people aren't blocking the first lane of traffic, creating, in many cases, traffic that backs up 6 or 7 blocks or creates safety hazards for bikers coming down. We certainly do see in certain residential areas it also being important. Most cities do start in commercial or mixed use areas, but where you have high density residential areas, it's not a bad idea to consider or look into that.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things you mentioned there as well is crucial to why we're even having this conversation. It was not that long ago when people had to walk around with a pocket full of quarters just to be able to park in the city, right? And technology, whether we like it or not, is going to change the way that a city works and the way it moves. Mr. Klein, I've shared this before, but I remember years ago when you and myself and Tommy Wells were standing at 14th and U, and we were talking about all those pocket full of quarters and parking meters, and you pulled out a much earlier version of this and said, this is what people are going to pay on. This is how this is going to work. And we started moving towards a park mobile model in different ways to make it a lot easier, right? So we have to be willing to embrace innovation and technology to understand how to better manage these spaces. So that's really crucial to this. I do think some people could look at this cynically, though, and say, this is just a way you're going to grab money. This is just a way you're going to raise more money by just charging people more. How have you responded to that in other cities? How has that played out in terms of, you're just going to send me more tickets. You're just trying to raise more money. This isn't actually about managing my curbside better. We hear the same arguments when we talk about automated traffic enforcement, even though we see actually it has a dramatic improvement around speeding and public safety and roadway safety where we use these tools. But how have you responded to that criticism or that cynicism that this is just trying to grab more money?
It's a good question. I think, two things. One, we're a technology provider to cities. We don't create policies. We don't create prices. That's entirely up to our city partners and what they want to implement. But from a policy perspective, I'll say one of our first advisors was this man named Donald Shoup, who passed away this past year. He's a very well-renowned urban planning professor from UCLA who spent the bulk of his life studying parking in cities and found that by and large, the curb today is free. And as a result, we have 30% of cars circling the block, searching for parking. We have massive additional challenges around emissions and safety hazards that stem from essentially giving away the right of way so that people abuse it, they misuse it. If you want to park off street in downtown DC, I don't know what you're spending, but probably $20, which is why people will then linger in a loading zone that's free, that then creates the safety hazard for a delivery vehicle or maybe a gig worker that has to stop in a travel lane or in the middle of traffic. And it generally is, the rate isn't meant to generate revenue, but it's meant to change behavior through incentives and disincentives. And that's what we've seen in other cities. Every city has its own blend of policies and rates to change behavior, but really identifying what the policy outcomes that we want to achieve are first, and then backing into the rates or regulations that get you there. These programs are generally not meant to be punitive, and everything is very highly configurable to different rates and policies. But at the end of the day, today, most cities are doing next to nothing to manage this type of activity. And by doing any form of rates or regulations, you generally get better outcomes.
Yeah. So there's no such thing as free parking.
There's no such thing as free parking. And I just want to add, if it's okay, that from the data you showed me, the vast number of people do not get a second ticket. And I think that's really important because right now, when you're relying on the traffic control officer, well, you're sort of looking around, you don't see anybody. You're like, okay, I'm going to just leave it here. And then you're in for 5 minutes and it becomes 15 minutes and you hope you don't get a ticket, right? When there's a camera there, the behavior change is just different. And so there's a huge reduction. I forget, it was like 90% of people do not get a second ticket. The goal is to free up the space so that these people who really need the space have access to it. And with graduated pricing, which that's what I wrote my article about, which I'm a fan of, you can say, okay, it's 10 cents for the first 5 minutes, then 20 cents, and then it can double. And then you start to also equate on-street parking with off-street parking, and you start to set the rates so it's sort of fair. You make it inexpensive for the quick pickup and drop off, but then over time, if somebody wants to stay for 2 hours, they can. And in reality, you don't have to give them a ticket, but you could charge them $40 for the use of that space. So that's where DDOT comes in, and they can be very creative with the policy, and they have super talented people that have thought about this. And I think the more freedom they have to think about how they want to do it and be able to adjust it over time with feedback from the business folks will be really, really important.
Okay. Another what feels like kind of elephant in the room is going to be around ticket reciprocity. So I agree, the vast majority of people get one ticket, and you don't have to have exorbitant costs to that ticket. I don't want to be separated from $5, from $10 from my wallet, right? So if I see one ticket, I'm going to change behavior most likely off that. We do have a group of people, however, Virginia and Maryland, who have not seen ticket reciprocity. And so we see cases where tens of thousands of dollars have been racked up because they don't actually have to ever pay it. And that's become a known thing. Now, luckily, there was a very forward-thinking council member on this council that passed the STEER Act, which gave the Attorney General the ability to start going after those dangerous drivers and hold them accountable. That's starting to see some results. But how have you looked at this from other jurisdictions? So most of the places you're talking about, probably you're going to have some out-of-state tags. But by and large, if I'm in Miami, I'm assuming most of the vehicles are going to be Florida tags. So you don't deal with the ticket reciprocity issue in the same way. Most of the experiences there don't have what the district's going to uniquely have, where you have 3 jurisdictions all in one. What kind of thoughts have you had around your experience with that, or things we should be thoughtful around in terms of how do you make sure you actually get the compliance you want?
One of the biggest things, our product, as you compared it to Curb Pass, is like Easy Pass. Once you register once in any jurisdiction, you're able to automatically pay in any jurisdiction. So just from a compliance perspective, that's a very effective tool that we've seen, vehicles in many other jurisdictions park in other jurisdictions, and they're just using the same account. Once they're registered, they're good to go. They don't have to worry about anything. So that helps in a lot of instances. We also work with Philadelphia, a number of cities in northern New Jersey, where they share borders in Philadelphia with New Jersey, and in Hoboken, Fort Lee. They have a lot of New Yorkers, a lot of Pennsylvania drivers. There's a few different ways to approach reciprocity from a technical perspective and from a legal perspective. Generally, we've seen there's a few different ways to notify staff in real time of scofflaws and things like that, to alert to DDOT or whoever the relevant party may be. Hey, this person just stopped here. They have $20,000 worth of outstanding tickets from Virginia. Go track that vehicle down, because obviously they're driving unsafe and creating a lot of safety hazards in the district. But there's different approaches. Overall, though, there are a number of different solutions that we've seen be effective in other jurisdictions as well.
Got it. Okay. Just real fast, I was on the way the technology uses, I guess, as you talked about, it reminded me. Very recently, I drove to New Jersey and used my Easy Pass to pay the tolls. I didn't register separately with New Jersey. And while we were there, I had to drive somewhere, and there was a Park Mobile sign, and just brought that up and didn't have to register for a new thing. So the technology platforms allowed me to use those spaces pretty easily and seamlessly, frankly. Mr. Rauer, I'm sorry. Hey, can you turn your mic back?
Great. Oh,
There you go.
did I do it right?
Yep, it's on.
Okay.
Technology.
You raised interesting points in your comments about how maybe a driver could be flagged in a certain way if they had some sort of citation in one jurisdiction and another. And this is something maybe I'd like to ask the council from a policy perspective. I have encountered information reports from Illinois regarding an audit of improper use of data obtained through a automated license plate reader technology. How will that be addressed here in the district? I know that ALPR is already implemented from a speeding citation violation perspective, but now that it's expanding, we should raise and discuss privacy issues and the authorized use of that data, especially now.
Yeah. It's certainly something we work on. If you could share after the hearing, whatever that report is you found in Illinois, I'd be happy to take a look at it to kind of think that through. I know we have another panel, so I want to kind of wrap up here and be able to move on to our next panel. I guess to Mr. Lakatos first, quickly for you, you'd mentioned your ANC have been supporting technology like this one before. Was there a use case you had in mind? Was it commercial areas in your neighborhood? Was the ANC seeing a specific problem and thinking that technology would be part of a solution? Or was it more general of just the ANC recognizing that across the city, there's the opportunity for technology to be used in this way?
No, it was a specific problem. We had, well, there were a couple ones. For one, around neighborhood loading zones, DDOT had installed a loading zone on the 900 block of W Street, was for one example. The loading zone was intended for a lot of like UPS delivery trucks that come to the large residential buildings adjacent to that zone, but it was just full of people illegally parking all day. And so then the trucks would just illegally park in the middle of the road. They didn't really have a choice. There was nowhere else to go.
Right.
Our other resolution around the U Street performance parking zone was, we have this really, important new neighborhood initiative to, dynamically price the cost of parking in the U Street area. But even with a surge of DPW officers, there's only so much enforcement that can happen. Especially, given if we're going to be charging, looking at like this revenue capture from people who drive into the area at night, that they're just missing out on because there's only so many, PEOs who we have enough overtime budget to cover for as a part of like a nighttime task force.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful to understand that aspect. And then lastly, Mr. Justice, just as you've thought about the experience you've seen in other jurisdictions, are there any growing pains or pinch points that you would flag for us at this point of where we are kind of exploring this idea, looking at the legislation? How would you create or stand up a pilot program if you don't launch a citywide effort at first? Any experience that you've seen that you kind of reflect upon with the district being at this stage of this development?
I would say what we've seen go really well in other cities is keeping policies simple to some extent at the start, so people understand, what am I getting a ticket for? What am I paying for? It can be easy to overcomplicate some of these things in many cases, creating, different carve-outs or more complicated dynamic structures. Even though dynamic rates in many cases make sense, it can be difficult to effectively communicate that to the community. Outside of that, I generally recommend starting where you feel you have the biggest problems and following the data, looking at where you have the most double parking today, where you have your Vision Zero network that is heavily impacted in your urban core, and targeting those areas where you can definitively make a positive impact quickly.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. All right. I want to thank everybody for this panel. Sure. If you can turn your mic on real fast. Yep. Can you turn your mic on?
There was a comment, I think I heard about 2 hours being $40 to be assessed. That gave
Just
me
an
an
example.
ulcer.
Yeah.
Gave me an ulcer because the price of a commercial loading zone permit is about in the high 300s annually. So, oh boy, if it's that rate,
I think I'm just gonna, I think Mr. Klein was trying to just, and this is the danger of throwing out hypotheticals. He dangerously threw out a hypothetical. That's not in the proposal. It's not here. I think he was using it as a example to illustrate the point of if I'm an Uber Eats driver, and I'm only gonna be at that curb for 5 minutes while I run in to grab the burger and get back out, I'm gonna be charged something like 10 cents. But if I need to use my parking, if I'm gonna be there taking up that curbside for 2 hours, which now means I'm stopping every other Uber Eats driver from being able to make quick visits, I'm obviously gonna start to pay more. And so he was giving an example. He got himself in trouble by saying an actual dollar amount. So let's try to unpack the ulcer.
That very scenario will apply to our members because they're not just taking the space and leaving. They will be there servicing accounts on that block or longer. So obviously, time for a further conversation.
They will have further conversations, but I will just say the general principle is that if you're going to block up a curbside space for a very long amount of time, I think we can wrap our heads around the fact you'd probably pay more than if you were in and out. And that's the general theory behind it. Got himself in trouble by saying a dollar amount. There's no such dollar amount that's assessed or outlined in this legislation at all. All right, I'm going to move on to our next panel because we got a lot more witnesses to get to. So thank you all very much. All right, our next panel, I've got Yariel Diaz, who's the Director of Government Affairs with Serve Robotics, Carl Hansen, who's the Vice President of Government Relations with Coco Robotics, and Sean Townsend, the President and CEO of the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington. And I think Yariel Diaz is joining us virtually, and Carl Hansen and Sean Townsend are here in person.
Good morning,
Yariel Diaz, I'll turn to you to get us started. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Allen and members of the committee. My name is Yariel Diaz, Director of Government Affairs for Serve Robotics. I'm pleased to be here today in support of Bill 26-0245, the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Amendment of 2025. I want to thank you for holding today's hearing and for your incredible leadership in modernizing the legal structure for this emerging technology. Last July, because of your efforts, Council adopted emergency and temporary legislation, which incorporates the goal of Bill 26-0245, namely to increase the weight of PDDs authorized to operate in the district from 90 pounds to 250 pounds. The permanent version of this legislation now under consideration would modestly raise the weight limit to 275 pounds. The bill authored by you and co-introduced by Council members Parker and Henderson builds on the Council's earlier legislation and creates a system for the operation of heavier personal delivery devices. It promotes innovation while keeping safety a top priority, and it positions the district to remain a leader in sustainable transportation. This legislation aligns with PDD weight limits incorporated in the laws of other states. Currently, 12 states allow for up to and over 500 pounds. The district's weight limit is the most restrictive in the country. Serve is proud to support this progress and was founded in 2017. Serve has built a fleet of electric zero-emission personal delivery devices. Our bots have successfully completed over 100,000 commercial deliveries in Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, Atlanta, and now Chicago. It's worth noting that Serve provides delivery support for over 2,500 restaurants across these 5 metros with reliability up to 99.95%, while achieving a 20% month-over-month growth for nearly 3 years. Our partners include Uber Eats, DoorDash, and NVIDIA. Each device has a delivery radius of approximately 1.5 miles, travels at a pace of a pedestrian, about 3 miles per hour, and operates for up to 14 hours on a single charge. In addition, PDDs have constantly monitored by remote operators and local staff, feature best-in-class mapping and obstacle avoidance, and are locked securely during the transport until the customer retrieves their order with a secure code. Updating the weight limit is essential to enabling the next generation of safer, more efficient devices to serve district residents. Devices like Serves weigh approximately 225 pounds, well within the 275 limit, but above the outdated 90-pound limit. Importantly, our deliveries replace car trips, which means fewer deliveries in vehicles are on the already congested roads, lower emissions, and improved services for residents and local businesses. By permitting this weight increase, the council is making possible safer, more sustainable, and more reliable delivery options. Chairperson Allen, thank you again for your leadership in modernizing the district's transportation framework. And thank you to Director Sharon Kirschbaum for all of her thoughtful and engagement and in support. Serve Robotics strongly supports this bill and looks forward to working in partnership with the district agencies, local businesses, and residents. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diaz. Next, let me turn to Carl Hansen.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Allen. I'm Carl Hansen. I serve as the Vice President of Government Relations for COCO. COCO has been operating our sidewalk delivery robots since 2020 in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Helsinki in Finland, and other cities across the US and Europe. In that time, we've completed more than 500,000 safe, sustainable, and cost-effective deliveries for local restaurants, grocers, and other merchant types. Our devices have traveled over 1 million miles and helped eliminate over 1 million pounds of CO2 emissions. We are thrilled. We were thrilled when Council adopted the emergency amendment this summer to adjust the weight limit for personal delivery devices. That change brought DC's program into alignment with other cities and states where we operate and made it possible for companies like COCO to apply. We strongly support the bill in front of you and hope to see it move forward today to make the adjustment permanent. After the amendment passed this summer, COCO immediately submitted our application to participate in DC's program. We also hired our general manager for DC operations and began making local investments to comply with the program's terms and conditions. We appreciate the thoughtful approach the city is taking to ensure a successful program launch, and we look forward to partnering with DDOT to help bring these benefits to local merchants and residents as soon as the program moves ahead. The technology offers real economic relief to small businesses and restaurants that have worked hard to adapt and remain resilient in a changing economy. COCO's sidewalk delivery robots can significantly cut delivery costs for restaurants compared to traditional car-based delivery. That's money that stays with local owners, helping them retain staff, lower fees for customers, and strengthen their margins. The technology also helps address one of the city's ongoing challenges, street congestion. Every robot delivery means one fewer car trip, fewer double parked vehicles, fewer emissions, with safer and more efficient experience for everyone sharing the public right away. We do know there have been some concerns about the amendment opening the program to multiple operators, and we certainly empathize with those concerns, given the experiences that cities had with the early deployment of dockless micromobility, and that tended to be a little chaotic. But given our experience in other markets, it's a very different operational model for our devices. We overlap with multiple operators in Los Angeles, Miami, and now in Chicago as well. And the feedback from community members, elected officials, our customers has been incredibly positive. We think the experience of multiple operators is probably the best way for the city to learn about the different types of service that can come from this technology, to see what works best to reward good behavior. The program does have a very limited fleet cap, and we think that's a good way to test how this goes. And if operators are performing well, they should be able to continue to scale. And if not, they should not be able to scale, or they should leave. Thank you for your time, for your leadership in modernizing DC's delivery infrastructure, and for continuing to support innovation that helps local businesses, residents, and the environment. We look forward to partnering with the city to make these benefits a reality, and hope to be supporting DC merchants and customers soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Townsend.
Good morning, Chairperson Allen, members of the committee and staff. My name is Sean Townsend, and I'm President and CEO of the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of Bill 260245, the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Act, Amendment Act of 2025. For more than 100 years, RMW has advocated for and fostered a community of more than 1,500 entrepreneurs and small businesses in the greater Washington area. We count among our members beloved neighborhood spots, family-owned businesses, homegrown restaurant groups, and of course, national favorites. Together, we are one of the largest job creators in the district and leading contributors to the local economy. We encourage the committee and the full council to pass this legislation for the district's Department of Transportation to implement these regulations and support innovation in the district's culinary scene and expand access to restaurants for district residents. The district's restaurant community continues to face mounting pressures. Declining sales and customer traffic have been compounded by federal workforce changes, rising costs from tariffs, workforce disruptions from this summer's federal actions, and now a government shutdown. Each of these factors alone would be challenging. Together, they create a major threat to the small, independently owned restaurants that anchor our neighborhoods and provide pathways to opportunity for thousands of district residents. In this unprecedented environment, we welcome innovative solutions that can help our restaurants thrive. Personal delivery devices represent practical technology that can expand both access and opportunity while reducing operational costs. The current 90-pound weight limit for personal delivery devices, established in 2018, is outdated and the most restrictive in the nation. While at least 13 states allow for modern, heavier delivery service devices, the district's current weight limit prevents our community's restaurants from accessing technology that is available to thousands of restaurants elsewhere. Expanding delivery options addresses the growing demand for restaurant delivery while making our city's culinary diversity more accessible. Residents with mobility challenges can enjoy favorite restaurants without traveling, and busy families gain reliable delivery options when time is limited. For restaurants, this technology provides affordable delivery capabilities that helps them serve existing customers more frequently as well as reach new ones. Personal delivery devices offer environmental benefits through zero-emission operations, helping reduce traffic congestion and carbon emissions. These devices also create local district jobs in technology monitoring, maintenance, and customer service, providing additional employment opportunities during a difficult economic period. By supporting this legislation, the district can join other forward-thinking cities that have already implemented this technology and enable restaurants to access delivery solutions that have worked elsewhere. This Amendment Act is one practical solution that addresses real challenges facing our restaurant community. By modernizing outdated weight restrictions, this legislation expands restaurant access for all residents while supporting small businesses that define our neighborhoods. RAMW encourages passage of this legislation and urges DDOT to implement regulations promptly. We stand ready to work with the committee and DDOT to ensure successful implementation. Thank you for your leadership and continued support, and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks to all three of you. Mr. Diaz, I know you might have a time commitment. You've got to slip out in just a second. So let me start with you a couple of questions. I think you had mentioned that you are currently negotiating for a lease for a hub in the city. Can you just talk, what does a hub look like? How does that work? How does it deploy out of a hub? What does a hub mean? Can you share more about that?
Yes, of course, Chairman. And I've since moved the meeting that had the conflict, so I can be
Okay.
here as long as you need me. So basically, every time that we operate in a market, we need somewhere to store the bots.
Mhm.
How it works is we have usually a commercial or industrial space. This is where we begin to house the bots, charge the bots, clean the bots, and then at the beginning of every day, we put them out into service. So it depends on where the site is located. If it's located within the operating area, we can release the bots directly from this location, literally just open the door and start putting them out into service. If it's not within the operating area, we would load them onto a van and then pre-position them throughout the operating area to make sure that they're there to be able to get to the restaurants as quickly as possible.
Got it. That was, you anticipated my next question, which was, if you put a hub in one place, but you need to have service somewhere else, how do you get them there? So you load them up and essentially drive them there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so not entirely different from the way we reposition, for example, our bike share fleet or things like that, where we load them up into vans, recirculate them around so that they're positioned in the right spot.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. I think you also talked about you have a partnership with McKinley Tech High School or developing one. Could you share more about that?
Yes, sir. Earlier in the year, we did a presentation there of our autonomous technology. They have a robotics club, and they were very excited to see the bot, especially when they realized that every bot has an individual name. All the kids started asking me if their name was part of our list, and now I could actually go back to them and show them the full list because we now have the full list of the over 2,000 robots that we will have across the entire US by the end of this year. We have committed to a financial contribution to the robotics program, and we are excited about figuring out an internship program with those young kids who are very, very excited about robotics and our product.
Excellent. Okay, that's good to hear. And just a quick plug for McKinley Tech. I understand they have an outstanding STEM program and robotics program there, so that sounds like a really natural fit. That's great to hear. Let me ask a little about, let's just jump right into this, right? If I'm on the sidewalk and all of a sudden I got a robot coming down the sidewalk at me, I might be a little alarmed at first. It's new. We're not really used to it yet, even though we had piloting a little bit of it. So some folks are going to understandably be worried about just safety. Is this thing going to get out of my way? If I've got a narrow sidewalk, if I'm talking about somebody who's pushing a stroller, might be in a wheelchair, have a mobility challenge, is this thing going to get out of my way? I'm concerned. Talk to me about the technology, and Mr. Jansen, maybe I'll have you start, and then Mr. Diaz, if you want to jump in after that. How are you using your technology with a focus on safety for that pedestrian in particular, the vulnerable pedestrian who might be on a sidewalk, or as we have in DC, we've got some pretty narrow sidewalks where it may be hard for two things to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. And safety is a top priority for us. And we're very proud of our safety record across all the over 1 million miles of trips we've done. And it's a mix of both technology and training for our operators. So at the technology level, there's essentially a virtual buffer that surrounds every robot so that if a person or a pet comes within that bubble, the bot will automatically start to slow down before the operator even has a chance to respond, and it'll come to a full stop. And then on the training, the pilots go through 30 hours of training before they do their first delivery, and they're trained to be essentially the most inferior form of pedestrian, and that they yield to all other users of the pedestrian space. Mm-hmm. That means that if they see somebody that may have a mobility challenge, or if they come to a narrow section of sidewalk where a sandwich board sign is blocking a section of sidewalk, they'll pull to the side and let others pass before they continue through.
Okay. Mr. Diaz?
Yes, and actually I echo most of what Carl said because our technology works very similar. Our robot uses LiDAR in order to work when it's working in autonomous mode. So it's already pre-programmed, like Carl said, to have a buffer area around it so that it begins to slow down as a pedestrian is coming towards it. To get very specific to your question about very narrow sidewalks, our bot is as wide as a wheelchair. So we normally are operating on sidewalks that are ADA compliant. When there are sidewalks that are not ADA compliant, we are mostly not there. But even when you have compliance, which sometimes that is still a very narrow sidewalk, the bot will give preference to the pedestrian. So in a situation where the bot is operating on a sidewalk and it's already mid sidewalk, it'll try to move over as best as it can. We've also had situations where the bot has had to, via an operator, back all the way up to allow the person in a mobility device to get through and then continue on its route. Okay. I'd also like to point out that we are operating, as Carl said, in Miami, which for us includes Miami, Coral Gables, and Miami Beach. The city of Miami Beach has identified several sidewalks that are not ADA compliant, that they're working to get up to compliance. So we have removed those sidewalks from our operating area.
Got it. Okay. Could you both share a little more so people and that I can understand? What parts of the delivery are autonomous? You use the word pilot, so I'm imagining somebody sitting with a computer and a joystick driving this thing. What parts of the trip are autonomous? What parts of the trip have an operator who is moving it, or is the operator only flagged to jump in at certain times? Can you just explain that a little more?
Yeah, so it is a hybrid model. There's always with us one pilot to every robot observing at all times. The features that are on are largely like safety and efficiency. So there's like lane centering, similar to like what a car would have. So if a bot's wheel hit a tree well, it would automatically recenter. So the bot's essentially on a track. But the pilot's there and at all times able to steer. And then if anything complicated comes up, they're there to navigate.
In a 1-to-1 ratio.
1-to-1 ratio. Yeah. In the longer term, that probably will change. But at least for the immediate future of this pilot, it will be 1-to-1.
Okay. And Mr. Diaz?
Yes, and in our case, the bot is operating almost at all times in autonomous mode when it's on the sidewalk, and mostly being operated when it's crossing the street from sidewalk to sidewalk. Also in situations where it is encountering something, an obstacle that it's not prior programmed to operate with. As an example, in LA, there are a lot of unhoused folks. And we were doing some testing recently around being able to properly detect when someone is completely obstructing the sidewalk, where they may be covered by a white sheet, as an example, and then the sidewalk, in the heat of the day might look really, really white as well, just to make sure that it can operate in a way that it makes sense autonomously, so that we don't have to continue to tag in with a remote operator.
Okay. And then when we talk about other pedestrian users and the buffer that you talked about, how far out is the bot seeing and picking up that pedestrian? In other words, all right, I'm in a wheelchair, I'm coming down a residential sidewalk. I can see that bot 50, 80, 100 feet away. When does it see me? Because I might say, I'm about to come into conflict with this thing, and maybe I'm the one that's got to turn around. Can you help me understand? I get the idea of the buffer around it. How far out are you picking up that pedestrian before they reach the buffer?
Yeah, it picks them. I mean, it's like a high definition camera that will see them far away, so that the pilot would recognize them, and they're recognized in the software as well. And then once they reach the buffer, it starts to slow down. And we sized that buffer based on like tests we did with what felt comfortable with people walking near the robot.
Okay.
Yeah, and from our perspective, Chairman, same. We use LiDAR and cameras to detect it from a very, very far distance. When it comes to braking distance, the braking distance is around 2.1 feet. Stopping distance, including the perception reaction time, is within 6 feet. And then the average moving speed, if we're in motion, is about 0.75 feet and 0.32 for stopping distance. So it's very, very, very quick.
Okay. All right. Mr. Hanson, what is the state of your deployment in the district right now?
We are not deployed in the district yet. We've applied and are waiting.
Okay.
For the program the applications to be reconsidered. Yeah.
Okay. So the pause essentially is impacting that.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Diaz, same for you?
Same, sir. We were literally on the verge of applying and received notice from the district that the program had been paused. We had already hired or put offers out to hire staff members and had that lease, and we've had to pause those offers until we can get some clarity on when we will be able to operate. Because we do not have clarity yet.
Okay. And then from the standpoint of how many can be in operation at one time. So let's flash forward. Let's assume the pause is lifted, this legislation passes, your applications come through and you're approved. How many are you actually looking to operate?
Yeah, I mean, we would start with whatever cap the city is comfortable with. I mean, generally when we launch, we start a pretty small program of like 20 or less bots in one area. We map that area out, and then we begin servicing those customers, and then we would scale from there. And everywhere we've operated has only allowed us to scale. No one's ever asked us to scale back, and that includes the markets where we operate in a tandem with Serve and other operators.
Okay.
Same for us. It was based on the limitations of the program, what we were proffering to operate at a scale. So we begin with a handful of robots and then scale our way up. That's how we've done it in every market, and that's how we intended to do it here as well.
Okay. Are there limitations on what is delivered? I mean, I think we've been talking about this a lot in the food context. Are there limitations around that? The size? I mean, if I'm ordering an extra large pizza, is that going to fit in this thing? Is there a quantity of food I might be ordering because I'm feeding the whole family and the block, and I can only fit so much? What are some of the limitations that you've experienced?
Yeah, go ahead, Yariel. I can take it right after you. I've been leading.
Yeah, from our perspective, we can fit about four 16-inch pizzas. So that's as big as it fits inside there. The cargo hold can hold about 50 to 60 pounds inside. If you're ordering for the whole block, it might be more than one robot showing up at a time. And as to different use cases, right now we're partnered with Uber Eats and DoorDash to only do food deliveries. That doesn't mean that we cannot in the future do something else, but that is the only thing that we're partnered with for now.
Yeah, and we actually had a really fun day at the warehouse where we ordered pizzas from just about every major U.S. pizza provider in the city of Los Angeles and sized them and designed the current vehicle to be able to serve multiple large pizzas. And we do that in many markets. We deliver everything from pizza to ice cream, soups, coffee, all across the board. But we're open to anything that's being moved over short distances. That could be retail items. We do grocery.
Okay. Mr. Townsend, I want to pull you in a little bit too. If I understood correctly, you were saying kind of given what was previous, the law of it's got to be less than 90 pounds, really restricted the number of operators we might have. So we don't have that many, as I understand it, we don't have that many restaurants that are actually utilizing this technology yet. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. I'm assuming the robot's not coming in through the front door into the dining room. What are some of the concerns you've heard, or kind of just the practical solutions that restaurants are seeking when a delivery comes in, and they're used to this at this point now with what's happened over the last few years, and a human being comes in, usually they've got a station off to the side, they're picking up that meal to go, and then they're heading out the door. Does this require something different of that restaurant now to where someone at the front of the house has to go manually put it into the machine? Does the robot have adequate parking space out on the sidewalk so it's not blocking the door for entrances of other patrons that might be coming in? What are some of the operational or kind of just practical impacts you've heard from some of your restaurants?
It's a good question. So I think, just as we had to adjust during the pandemic when, third-party delivery was a lifeline, a lot of restaurants and the staff working at these restaurants weren't accustomed to delivery drivers coming in, and they had to build out space in their restaurants for the pickup orders. I think just like in those moments, this is another opportunity for restaurants to adjust, probably train some staff, work with the companies that are on board in the district to provide some education and figure out what the best operation process or model is for restaurants. I think restaurants will pivot and make the adjustment to serve the public. In terms of space, no shade to the scooters and the mopeds who fill up the parking spots illegally and sometimes legally in front of restaurants. I think this creates an opportunity where deliveries can be handled more safely and in a legal matter where these robots are pulling up to the front of the establishment.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, because I had some experience with the Serve robot, there's a notification that happens when the robot arrives to the establishment that signifies to the worker that it's outside, and they take the food outside and the bin opens and you drop it in and they're off there. They're on their way.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. That's helpful. And as we kind of go down this road, would love to kind of hear continued feedback from our restaurants of what works, what doesn't. And again, since we're not the first city doing this, it's probably helpful to get some of that experience from other cities and jurisdictions too. Kind of want to wrap up here so we can move to DDOT, but one or two more quick questions. Mr. Hanson, Mr. Diaz, what's the types of data that you in your other cities you're having to provide to their departments of transportation? Obviously, if you're going to be rolling around on all our sidewalks, there's some element of data collection we would find interest in, and that partnership could happen. What type of partnerships around data have you created with other cities?
Yeah, a few different things. So multiple cities use the MDS data specification for managing the micromobility programs. And a number of those cities have adjusted that to work with us. And that's essentially just information about where the bots are deployed, where they're going, where they're starting, ending, how many bots are out there. Happy to do that. We also do regular reports just on like number of deliveries, emissions reductions, customer feedback kind of things. And then we actually just got a grant this year from the European Union in partnership with the city of Helsinki to take some of the sidewalk condition data that we're collecting and share that back with the city. So that can be anything from missing curb cuts to obstructions in the sidewalk, a fallen over scooter. That gets added to our map as an obstruction, so we'll route around it. And we can instantaneously send that to the city also and say, hey, there's a report of a scooter that's fallen over or a car that's, pulled across the sidewalk and is blocking it. And so I think there's a lot of applications for this technology to make the sidewalk space better and safer for all users, not just delivery robots.
Okay. Mr. Diaz?
Everything Carl said. Most of what we share out is regulatorily required as part of our permits, whether it's in the city of West Hollywood, our agreement with LADOT, our Chicago permit, and even the requirements that we were given here by DDOT required us to integrate into MDS, Mobility Design Specifications, which would give some of that fleet data out. In Chicago, we're required to give out a carbon emission reduction data and miles traveled. So like these are all the things that we normally give. And anything that we have to give out, Carl's company also has to give out because it's based on the requirement in market.
Yeah. Got it. I mean, I think there'd be immense value if a device is going over sidewalks and your LiDAR and your technology is capturing conditions of sidewalks, whether it's a loose brick, there's a pothole in the road, everybody jumps around and goes and gets that fixed within 24 hours. But our sidewalks, where we all need to be able to get around safely, take a lot longer. Yeah. But if there's a mechanism set up in partnership with DDOT where that type of information is shared back in real time to help support DDOT's ability to go get that sidewalk safe for all users, I think that could be a really interesting type of partnership and data sharing arrangement.
Yeah, would love to be part of that.
Yeah. Mr. Townsend, one more quick question for you. And it really comes from something I saw happen just 2 days ago. I was watching a food delivery driver on a moped. And as he was going through an intersection, actually, he was delivering pizzas, 3 pizzas. So he's driving the moped one-handed. He hits a pothole, actually, and crashes. Fortunately, he's okay. He gets back up. He gets back on the moped. Those pizza boxes were turned sideways, upside down, multiple ways. Now, somebody got pizza delivered to them, and I'm going to wager that person probably dropped that pizza there and left, and they found the cheese on the top of the pizza and all over the place, right? I know I've talked with some of our restaurants who are very concerned about, for their customers, the quality of the meal they prepared and not having confidence that it's going to actually show up hot, prepared the right way. And when I go on my little Yelp review, I'm going to be dinging the restaurant, not the delivery guy, right? So is that something that you've seen from some of our restaurants? Do you feel like this type of device, which may not be traveling as fast as that moped, so there's a risk of it's not as hot and fresh when it gets to me. What are some of the feedback you've maybe seen or some of the concerns around that? Because I imagine, obviously, as the person who cooked the meal, you have a very vested interest in making sure your customer gets what they ordered and is happy about it, regardless of how it got to them.
Yeah, good question. You are a veteran third-party delivery customer when you've had experience receiving a upside down pizza or a soggy burger. But yes, that is always, I think, part of the concern about deliveries in general when the food leaves the restaurant, how it's packaged. I think during COVID, just kind of going back to that, restaurants had to figure out, many of them, how to package the food a little differently so that it can travel and also show up in a manner that did not impact the integrity of the food. With that being said, I do think that the robots, no shade to the other delivery components and third party, but I think they do provide an alternative, much safer method of food delivery, and won't be upside down pizzas in the robot.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, I want to make sure we can get to DDOT and bring them up here for their testimony. So this is really helpful. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Diaz, for rescheduling your meeting so we could get your input on this too. That was really helpful. So thank you all very much. All right, we're going to turn to our government witnesses. So let me now ask Sharon Kirschbaum, who is the director of the Department of Transportation. I believe you have some expertise with staff that's available if you need to pull on them, but you're going to be the one delivering testimony, right? Okay. All right, and our committee always swears in our government witnesses before their testimony. So if I can do that real fast, then I'll turn it over to you to deliver your testimony. Then we'll turn to some questions. If you can raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm on penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Director, good to see you. And I'm sure you enjoyed seeing some of your predecessors that were here as well. Notably, I believe they got out of the room before you had to come up. Maybe they were reliving some moments there. But let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. And good morning, Committee Chairperson Allen, members of the committee, district residents. My name is Sharon Kirschbaum, and I am the Director of the District Department of Transportation, commonly referred to as DDOT. I'm here today to present testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser regarding Bill 260244, the Micromobility Fire Safety Standards Act of 2025, Bill 26-0245, the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Amendment Act of 2025, and Bill 260246, the Automated Curbside Management System Amendment Act of 2025. For the first, the Micromobility Fire Safety Standards Act, this bill would require electric bicycles, electric mobility devices, and traction batteries manufactured, distributed, sold, or offered for lease or for rent in the district to meet safety standards. The bill would also require the certification mark from a certification body displayed visibly on the equipment, device, or product, verifying conformity to these standards. Electric bikes, electric scooters, and other electric micromobility devices offer residents and visitors a convenient alternative to personal vehicles and contribute significantly to the district's multimodal transportation network. As these devices increase in popularity, DDOT recognizes the importance of user safety and abating incidents of batteries or devices experiencing thermal runaway. All DDOT permitted shared fleet devices are already tested and certified to UL 2849, UL 2272, and UL 2271 and meet the testing and certification requirements the bill establishes. DDOT also already requires certification from the International Organization for Standardization, known as ISO, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEEC, as referred to in the bill as ISO IECE 17065. Under DDOT's permitted operator agreement, we require certification of their equipment, and we hold physical certificates from the operators. Additionally, we believe the bill positively promotes the adoption of uniform safety standards among unpermitted operators and businesses who manufacture, distribute, sell, lease, and rent micromobility and traction batteries in the district, and aligns their products with industry best practices. DDOT encourages the council to consider minor revisions to the bill's requirements. First, we recommend that the bill is revised to allow ion batteries, micromobility devices, and parts to have certification by an ISO IEC 17065 certified lab as an alternative option to a nationally recognized testing laboratory, NRTL, within the certification body definition. And we recommend that documentation showing certification may be provided to DDOT by a permitted operator and Capital Bike Share as an alternative to displaying the certification mark visibly on the exterior of the equipment. Like NRTL's, ISO certified labs provide a comprehensive review to ensure the safety and reliability of micromobility products. NRTLs are already ISO IEC 17065 accredited and recognized by OSHA. New York City requires micromobility devices and batteries receive either ISO IEC 17065 or NRTL certification. We have not identified any jurisdictions that require both, and we believe requiring both may be burdensome to our shared fleet device operators without offering significantly higher safety assurances. Next, while our operators' equipment and devices have certification, these devices do not specifically have physical certification mark that is visible and affixed to the equipment. We recognize the importance in promoting transparency and assurances that equipment meets the prescribed certification standards and believe the documentation provided to DDOT is sufficient to demonstrate product conformity. Next, the Personal Delivery Device Weight Limit Amendment Act bill would raise the weight limit for personal delivery devices, otherwise known as sidewalk robots or PDDs, from 90 pounds to 275 pounds. The weight limit is currently set at 250 pounds per emergency and temporary legislation that will expire in May 2026. DDOT currently has one permitted operator, KiwiBot, whose PDDs are well under the 90-pound weight limit. KiwiBot is permitted to operate in and around the Howard University and George Washington University campuses. And they've also partnered with DDOT to conduct successful sign inventory and sidewalk condition assessment pilots. The emergency weight limit change expanded the potential applicant pool for PDD permits, which DDOT was not anticipating when it originally opened the application. The permit program is currently on pause while we determine how to account for potentially larger devices and overlapping service areas between operators. We are also investigating how current permittee performs, and particularly how the PDDs interact with pedestrian and wheelchair users. DDOT is interested in the promise of fewer delivery vehicles on our roadways that these devices bring, but our agency's top priority is always the safety of vulnerable roadway users. It is critical for DDOT to see that these devices are not creating a new hazard, especially before permitting heavier, larger devices. It is also important for DDOT to create sound rules and regulations around these devices based on actual observed operations. Our agency should also have the authority moving forward to regulate the size and weight of these devices so we can make improvements and adjustments as the industry and program develop over time. DDOT is currently in the process of establishing rules for PDD operations. We would like to continue to work with the council to share our goals for the program, including maintaining safety and order on routes primarily used by pedestrians, our most vulnerable roadway users. Last, the Automated Curbside Management System Amendment Act would require that DDOT establish an automated curbside management system that uses cameras, sensors, or other technology to automatically bill drivers for their time spent at the curb, automatically identify parking violations, and issue fines for unlawful use of the curbside space. This bill would also require that DDOT establish within this system a smart loading zones program that manages curbside space reserved for picking up and dropping off passengers or loading and unloading goods with the use of an automated payment system. Regulations would be required for the Smart Loading Zones program no later than 90 days after the effective date of the bill, and the program would be required to begin operating no later than 6 months after the effective date of this bill. Additionally, the bill would require that DDOT, for any procurement related to implementation of the bill, prioritize applicants whose automated curbside management technology can provide additional functionality, such as automated lane enforcement, automated enforcement of moving violations, and a dynamic pricing system that adjusts parking rates based on demand. For residents and visitors in the district, an automated curbside management program would be a significant change. Today, to occupy the curbside, a driver needs to actively prepay for their time using an app on their phone, by paying the meter, or in the cases of commercial loading, through a permit. The automated program would either passively bill users in real time or send invoices after the fact. A program modification of this capacity would require adequate time to develop, test, deploy, refine, and introduce to consumers, and a significant customer education effort. DDOT has already identified the potential benefits of automated curbside management and has been actively researching to assess how to best implement technology in the district. In a request for information that was issued in September of 2024, DDOT gathered information from the automated curbside management industry. The responses indicated that it would be most beneficial if DDOT were given the authority to enter a revenue sharing agreement, such as a franchise agreement, that could provide the selected contractor with a share of the revenue from the collected fees in the automated curbside managed zones. The current language of this bill would not give our agency that authority. Additionally, DDOT is concerned that the procurement-related requirements of this legislation in its current form are overly prescriptive, especially given that DDOT may not have the operating budget to set aside the necessary funds that would allow for DDOT to carry out the required permit process. DDOT is also concerned about the mandated timelines for issuing regulations and operationalizing the program. 90 days would not provide enough time to issue regulations, and the 6-month deadline given to begin operating the program is infeasible, given that DDOT does not have control over the procurement process, which is one of the major barriers to operationalizing a program quickly. Technology in this industry is evolving rapidly, and DDOT would appreciate the opportunity to plan for how to best implement significant changes to curbside management in the district. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Director Kirschbaum. And thank you for coming in with testimony that kind of outlines some specific and constructive recommendations on the bill. So thank you. I'm going to kind of just work bill by bill, kind of the same way you did in your testimony, kind of work through each one of those. So let me start with the micromobility fire safety standards. First, because I want to make sure it's clear to the public, and you mentioned your testimony, but all of our devices that are part of the district's shared fleet already meet these requirements. So the testing and certification to meet UL 2849, UL 2272, and UL 2271, those are already met by our district shared fleet, our e-bikes, scooters, in fact, even our e-bike incentive program, that's a requirement there.
Yes, correct.
What we're really trying to get at, obviously, are while that fleet is spectacular, and as a frequent user, even as recently as this morning, is a great way to get around town and a safe way to get around town. We also have a lot of other e-bikes and e-scooters that exist in the city, and that's frankly really what we're trying to get at here. So could you help us understand, when you were making those decisions around maintaining those standards, how did DDOT make the determination or decision? Was it something that it was just industry best practice, and so you built that into contracts and partnerships around it? Was it something that you had a debate within the department around, should we have these standards or not? Can you just kind of share a little bit about how did you arrive at what I think is the right decision to have those standards met?
Correct. And you really did just state it. It was, we want to have best practice. We want to have the safeguards in place. We know that there's risks and concerns. And so this was an easy way to make sure that we were, going to be in compliance with the best standards, and we wouldn't have to worry about problems.
Okay. And since the district shared fleet is in partnership with another entity, who performs the testing and certification, for example? Or is that not known to DDOT? It's just that they have to bring that and present that testing and certification to DDOT as part of the fleet that they're helping manage with DDOT.
Correct. They bring their certification and information to DDOT.
Okay. All right. So you are on the receiving end of the paperwork, as it were.
Correct.
Okay. Is it an NRTL? Is it an ISO IEC accredited body, or is it both?
So our shared fleet device, the permanent operators have UL 2272 electrical systems and 2271 certified batteries. And these have certification by the ISO IEC 17065 certified labs, but not an RTL.
Okay. So I'm going to try to follow this thread. If the legislation passes as drafted, it's accurate to say you're in compliance with the safety standard, but would that mean that you would have to have, because the legislation both requires the NRTL and ISO IEC, that would require a different type of certification or just an additional paperwork to make sure that it's certified that way?
Correct. I am not clear if it would meet it. We just would need to get it certified, or if there'd be any concerns with meeting it. And that's why I think our suggestion of having it be either or would be the easiest path forward.
Okay. You've been in the room the whole day listening to testimony. When you heard the UL Solutions team that was testifying, what were your thoughts when I asked them specifically, should it be one or the other or both? And they made a strong argument that it should be both, that is, they are complementary of one another, and ensure the safest standard possible.
I understand that, that their position is going to have, I think, probably the optimal coverage. Our understanding is that when we looked at other jurisdictions, most were either or. And so we were hoping to be consistent with that. And we do think that those are adequate safeguards.
Okay. For our e-bike incentive program, so those do comply with the two standards, 2272 and 2849. How does DDOT enforce that requirement of the law?
For the e-bike incentive program, my understanding is that that is actually listed very much upfront to the providers who would be providing the bike. So we expect compliance, just because that's sort of out of the gate. If you want to participate, this is what we're looking for.
Okay. Does the program state these are the bikes that are eligible? Or in other words, what I'm hearing you say is DDOT's not conducting a prospective compliance with that standard, but you were saying these are the standards have to be met, and you are assuming that both the shop that is partnering to do it as well as the individual is selecting a bike that meets those standards.
Well, I should say that we do inventory the shops. We do take a look at all the offerings that the shops have to ensure that they're compliant. And so that is something that we do as part of participation in the program. And then we also require that the bikes that are selected are compliant bikes.
Okay. One of the things you noted in your testimony around the, I'm going to call it kind of the demarcation of these standards. It could be a sticker, it could be something else on there. That your recommendation is that just be presented to the Department of Transportation, not actually affixed to every battery that might be on a capital share, bike share e-bike, for example. Why not? Why not make sure that that sticker is affixed to all the batteries, for example, on capital bike share e-bikes?
It's just an onerous step. Our goal is obviously to make sure that the batteries are in compliance. We have the certificate listing that. It's an extra step to do. We have, there's over 7,000 electric scooters and 7,600 electric bikes through our shared fleet program. We have about 3,000 e-bikes. I'm not quite sure the stickers are going to last, after there's, lots of weather events. It just seems like one more step that we could avoid if we get the affirmation through the certificates up front.
Yeah. There's a bit of me that I hear what you're saying. But I also know that from a management of that fleet, they're touching those batteries every 2 to 3 days, depending upon the use of that bike. So every battery is going to have a staff person who's going to literally put hands on it as they're swapping out and charging those batteries fairly regularly. So it doesn't seem too hard to me to make sure that they're just quickly looking, is the sticker there? Is it in good shape? Did you put a new one on? I wonder if there's also a added benefit, though, of having that type of visibility for the public that sees this is the safety standard we want. And is there also a positive collateral impact in that many people just don't exclusively ride a capital bike share e-bike. They might have an e-bike of their own or other places. And so do we start actually creating an expectation in the community and in the public around what the right safety standard is by being a leader in that space, which is what we are, but by visibly putting on every battery, do we actually see a positive collateral consequence in that we raise awareness about what the standards should be for safety? And so you don't have an answer for that right now, but I do think there is merit to having that visible standard set that everyone is seeing more frequently, and that actually helps raise everyone's expectation and standard for other products.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I'm not quite sure that most users would be focused on it, if there would be any sort of, enforcement of compliance based on people walking by it, that they would pick up the phone and do anything if they saw that the sticker was missing. So, if there was actually a real strategy for if the sticker is missing, who's looking for it and what are they taking action on? Like there could be some more merits to doing it, but just to have it for the sake of having it in a place, where I'm not quite sure if it's actionable. I fail to see the big benefit of it. And I do see on the downside it being onerous, particularly on the programs that we are monitoring. We have very close oversight on CABI, and we know we have little concerns of that happening, but it would be a burden to have to now modify every single device, or at least to have some sort of sticker.
Okay, we can continue the conversation. I'm not convinced just putting a sticker on a battery is that onerous. I don't think it's that heavy of a lift, but we can keep the conversation about the utility of making sure, is that the right decision to make or not? All right, a couple more questions on this. At one point, indeed, I had been considering creating an e-bike battery sharing station where delivery workers could drop off a rundown battery for a charged one. Does that program exist?
Yeah.
Can you share any update on that?
Sure. So we have a drop-off program. It started in July, and it is there's 2 locations, and it's a year-long pilot. So we're trying to test sort of the feasibility of whether folks that are using e-bikes for this app-based food delivery program, if this can sort of help support that shift away from the mopeds and away from cars. And so we've done it to try to simplify the process. We don't expect that there's going to be issues in terms of making sure that the pilot continues, but it's been used to date. So again, it's still new. So I don't have anything specific to report out, but we've launched the 2.
Okay. I get anything about the usage, like how many people are using it or how many batteries are coming in and out of it?
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay.
Can follow
If you and your team could follow up and just let us know, I'd be curious to that. You were also here, so you heard the testimony from one of our public witnesses earlier, talking about the storage concerns. For that program, for example, do we use a UL, and I can't remember the exact number that was cited, but a storage container that meets that safety criteria, similar to what we do for our batteries, or is that so new and relatively recent because it was released after we introduced the bill, which is only this spring, so a few months ago? Is that not what we have yet?
I would say this would be more of a Department of Buildings question about having some sort of way to store the batteries within.
Sorry, I'm asking about
buildings.
the actual program we have right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the condo. Say this.
I am gonna, yeah,
Okay.
it kind of gets to that, right?
Okay.
So for the battery exchange program that we have right now, how are we storing those batteries? Do we use this kind of storage device that was talked about earlier today for that one program that we have right now?
Yes.
Separately is the bigger conversation around condo buildings. I'll get to that in a second.
Yes. So we have 2 cabinets that are designed for this. They're UL certified. They have an internal water bath for fire suppression so that if something does catch on fire, that it automatically gets submerged into water. So they were built precisely to help mitigate risks.
Got it. Okay. All right. And then you kind of previewed your answer what I'm about to ask, which is for the recommendation we heard about for high-rise buildings and a storage container. Sounds like you would prefer to defer to DOB on that?
Yes, I mean, I think the question is, should buildings be required to have some sort of similar cabinet for bike storage, for the battery storage? And I don't know what is entailed in doing that, but I think that is a question that Department of Buildings would be better equipped to understand and weigh in on.
Got it. Okay. We can follow up with them. Kind of as you heard me discussing with Mr. Ludlam, I totally get where he's coming from, which is a focus on safety and well-being for a building. We have both residential and commercial buildings. And of course, people bring different hazards into their apartments or condos all the time, be it a space heater or other things. So how do we distinguish? I think his argument was this actually has a unique type of harm. Not that other things don't have potential harms, but there's a uniqueness to this that warrants that. So we're going to chew on it a little more and kind of look at it. As you and your team maybe have some more time to think about what you have found using that type of UL device, storage device. It'd be helpful just to hear what your experience has been with that as we kind of think through that element. And we'll certainly reach out to DOB as well. Now, from a hazard perspective, my understanding is earlier this spring, we did have a battery that caught fire in a warehouse in the district as part of our capital bike share fleet. Thankfully, no injuries that I'm aware of. That's good news. But those devices, as I understand, as we talked about, are the UL certified standard capacity. Have we learned about what happened in that incident that you could share here? Again, even with that best of standards, we're never going to say it's going to be 100%. So can you share more details about that? And then have there been any other steps that you've taken since that fire to either mitigate future harms or hazards?
We did have an investigation when that happened. You are correct. It was in one of the warehouses that stored our Cabby batteries. We actually used the cabinets that are prescribed for storage. And so it really did minimize the use. We had fire suppression equipment that really did sort of nip the fire in the bud. And I think that it was a learning experience for us and affirmed that these safeguards are needed, but have had zero similar concerns and problems since then.
Okay. So in that instance, that was a Capital Bike Share e-bike battery meeting the standard that we all want, and then stored in a UL certified cabinet's the word you're using. I'm going to use that storage cabinet, storage container that had those kind of fire suppression apparatus attached to it, so that when it did, I'm going to say fail in whatever way it failed, it really minimized the damage.
Correct. That the
Okay.
system that we had for storage worked as intended.
Yeah.
We were in touch with Fire EMS at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have additional recommendations for us. So we are comfortable that our standards are sound.
Okay. I mean, you're kind of making the argument that we should really be looking hard at the storage container as an option there. But okay, that's helpful to know. And I'm glad to hear about that experience. And again, thankfully, nobody was injured, but it sounds like because DDOT and partners had made the right decisions, that's what happened there. Okay. Let me move to the personal delivery devices then. We only have one vendor currently operating. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And how many devices do we have running? Your testimony, you talked about 2 geographic locations. How many total do we have going?
So the vendor is KiwiBot, and they are permitted to have 25 devices operating.
Okay. And all of those are at the sub 90-pound device?
Correct.
Okay. So none of them are using the new weight that's been authorized through the emergency and temporary legislation?
Correct.
Okay. And is that because DDOT has paused the applications on further expansion of that?
So we had been starting conversations with KiwiBot well before any of the legislation changed. And so they were lined up. So when we were ready to issue a permit, they had been working with us for well over a year. We did put a pause on new permits. And it's interesting. I know that the emergency legislation has been focused on the weight. And I'll tell you what we really want to think about is actually the dimensions. So you can have a very small device that's heavy, which really would cause many fewer concerns than a very large device that's light. And I think that you brought up in your questioning about some of our more narrow sidewalks. You know, we have sidewalks that are 4 feet, and a device that's 3 feet in width really does create challenges for people, whether they're walking or with a stroller or in a wheelchair. So we still have a lot that we want to understand, both in terms of size, dimensions, weight, but also what does it look like if you have multiple operators? Now, when we had started the process, there was much less interest because of the 90-pound limit. And so I think we were a little bit surprised that once the weight limit changed, that we got a number of interested operators reaching out. And then I think it gave us some concerns that we could have multiple operators in the same place. I know that some of the folks testifying today said that they do that in other markets. We're aware of one. I don't think it is that common. And so we need to do a lot more research before we'd be comfortable having more than one. So my long-winded way of saying, you know, I do think regulations are needed. I think that there's a couple of areas that we want to make sure we have good safeguards in. And so looking at weight alone, it's sort of hard to say that's a concern, because I think there's multiple layers here that need to get really fleshed out in regulations.
Okay. Well, I'm actually not surprised we had interest from other potential vendors when we increased the weight, because I think what's been pretty, I mean, the reason why I moved the legislation in the first place is I was fairly convinced, while the 90 pounds made sense in 2018 when we first passed that legislation, both weight of batteries as well as just the innovation in the marketplace, that these devices have gotten larger from a weight perspective, weight larger. And especially with the way in which people do delivery service, there's a greater interest in it. So I'm not necessarily surprised. So tell me more what the pause means. So it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correct, the pause is because you want DDOT to issue regulations more, you want to study or evaluate the program that's up and running more. Can you expand more on
Yes and
why
yeah.
are we paused?
So we would like to use this opportunity with the one permittee to do a lot more study, right? To understand more about what the impacts are. These are small, but we do know that when it comes, head to head with a wheelchair, stroller person, we just want to make sure that we're able to observe what we need to have happen. We also need to, in the zones that it's in, at least make sure that we're mapping it correctly for narrower sidewalks. This would be something we would need to do if we were adding new zones, and figure out which ones would need to be avoided. But so study, yes, and we'd like to put in regulations, because I think that while weight we have some flexibility on, I think the dimensions of the devices are probably more concerning to us, and we would like to add some safeguards on that regard so that they're not too big.
But wouldn't that be something you're able to outline in the permit application or the regulation process? I mean, if you're concerned about like the width, which I agree with you, I want to make sure that we are thoughtful about that. But aren't you able just to, and you can frankly dictate what that's got to be for a permit application right now, right?
Well, I actually think that those should be in regulations, and we would like to do that, have regulations, and then open it up when we've got some more data collected from the current KiwiBot use and regulations. And then once we have a comfort level, part of that too is understanding zones. Do we want more than one in a zone? Testing that. So all of those things do need to happen before we would say we're very comfortable opening up to all interested operators.
But all right, I'm gonna kind of keep pushing on this a little bit though. Why wouldn't we want to have pilot experience from other other makers? If the industry standard is at the 200-pound-ish level, why would we not want to know what that experience looks like of running that? The minus 90-pound device sounds like it really isn't the industry standard. And it really, we may have some of them operating right now, but that's really not where we're going to see these devices moving in the future. So are we limiting what our pilot tells us if we're only allowing these smaller units when the industry standard is going to be a heavier unit? Might be the same width, might be the same height, but the weight's going to be different. And if we're not testing that, we're not really getting a full picture, right?
Well, I think we should test it, but we should test it and look at size. Again, weight to me is less of a question in terms of some of the conflicts with other sidewalk users than the dimensions. So let's do some testing. I don't want to move to deployment with a permit and then realize, wow, having two devices on the same block at the same time creates a new challenge. I'd rather do that in a more structured testing environment, and then we can decide if we want to open up the pause and provide more permits. But I think both things, testing and then clear regulations, are both needed before we open this up further.
I mean, I'm not against testing and piloting, but it feels right now like I just hear you saying we're just going to kind of stay in this pause space. Like when and how would the next step be taken?
Well, I think we'd like our next step to be able to draft some regulations and do some testing, which we can do now. But
I've seen us draft regulations for months and months or years and years. Like,
well, our regulations have been a little bit on pause because of the definition changing with the legislation, right? So I guess
well,
in
that was
some
only
ways,
the weight, and we worked with you guys on that. So I don't know what the regulation, like what more needs to happen for regulations to move forward to be able to test more broadly?
Well, where we need to know where this is going to land in terms of the emergency legislation. I would recommend that we pull out weight in the legislation and keep the definition very broad and let the regulations be where we talk about dimensions, weight, multiple operators in the same location, possibly things like zone size. I mean, there's some things that we should keep in regulations versus in something more evergreen like the legislation. And while we're crafting those, we'll be able to test our ideas on it. We also want to be able to be versatile as the industry changes. I don't know if the
Did I
heavyweights.
hear you say you want to pull out the weight though?
I think that in an ideal scenario, we would have things like weight and dimensions in regulations and not in
You
legislation.
guys supported the emergency legislation on the weight,
Well,
but so
you
now
asked,
you don't want weight.
I mean, I think the question was, do we have concerns? We don't have concerns with it, but I think it is probably more sensible for something to have it in a more dynamic. I think regulations are easier to adjust over time as the industry changes. And so in general, I would say weight and dimensions should all be put in regs. It's not a hill to die on in terms of the 250 or the 275, right? It's not that we have concerns per se with the weight number, which was the question you had asked a while ago, and we don't have concerns about that number. It's just more of a question of why we're putting in legislation, particularly when the biggest driver for some of the impact would really be more dimensions than weight.
Okay. What's different about the dimensions of these different devices that we've heard from today? Are they different widths?
Yes. I
Okay.
mean,
Which ones give you concern?
There's a dramatic range of dimensions. And so, KiwiBot, the width of a KiwiBot is 17 inches. And there are others that go up.
That's the sub 90-pound version,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. There are others that are, 38 inches in length, 29 inches in width. I mean, those are sizable devices. And so I do think that we have concerns with some of the larger ones.
Because if we're trying to test this, the much smaller sub 90-pound version, I'm not sure what it can really deliver in terms of like its cargo, right? Of like, what is it delivering? Is that comparable to what we would see in a larger device? And so if we constrain what it could actually carry and deliver, then we're also constraining what we're able to learn from it, because not that many people are going to actually be using those devices if they're kind of artificially constrained into very small models. So I'm concerned that we're not going to learn as much as we want from a pilot. I agree with you. We want to pilot this thing to help understand and learn from it, to say, how do we best use it? I completely agree with you that I want to see the partnership agreements that actually have data that comes back into DDOT that you would find helpful, that these types of devices that are traveling our sidewalks, and I think you and I talked about this before, being able to do sidewalk conditions to help supplement DDOT's work. I'm with you on that. I'm concerned though that this pause just doesn't really have an ending date, and it doesn't feel like we're moving towards actually piloting something that would give us the type of information we want to say, is this a good idea? How would it work? I mean, we heard from our witnesses that talked about in other cities where a sidewalk is too narrow, they just crossed off the list, and the bots cannot go down it because it does not meet the ADA width requirements. So that seems like that's a workable solution for us.
Sure, but there are, again, the two issues. One of them that compounds this is multiple operators in the same location, right? And so even if it's a 6-foot sidewalk, if you have two of them coming down at the same time, plus wheelchair, stroller, fill in the blank, we don't have enough information about multiple operators in the same zone. And I don't think that every zone, if you look across the city, I'm sure there are some, well, I know there are areas that will be more inviting for this, right? So we're not talking about a huge footprint. And so I think we need to be really mindful that there will be a concentrated demand in certain areas where there's, some fast casual restaurants and commercial areas. And one of the things that we do need to test and will in this period is having 2 or 3 devices from different operators, or maybe we would test it with the same, but on the same sidewalk. What does that look like? How does that change things?
When Uber Eats and DoorDash began delivering food in vehicles, did we pilot it and tell them we could only have one operator on our roadways?
No.
So why are we treating this so differently that we're going to allow anybody who wants to deliver on our roadways can do it? You can be in a car, you can be in a truck, you can be in a moped, you can be in a bike. But we're going to treat our sidewalks as very proprietary, only 2 tiny pilots. We're not going to test and see what it looks like to have multiple operators here. We seem to think it was okay to try multiple operators all at the same time, all kind of crashing into the market if it's on the road, but we're not doing it on sidewalks.
Well, and we don't regulate the Ubers, DoorDashes, those entities, and they are on the roads. The sidewalk does have a narrower space. We all, we have concerns with how these devices interact with wheelchairs. And we actually saw there was some video footage recently where it, was knocking into someone in a wheelchair, others where it cuts off pedestrians. So this is still new technology. It's not like someone driving a car. So I think
We
that
also knock into pedestrians and people in wheelchairs and crash into things.
um,
All that to say, you and I share the exact same goal around safe operations and effective operations, 100%. I am concerned that we are artificially constraining, though, our ability to test this out and see what it looks like. I think it's smart to do it in a pilot fashion. I think it's smart to do it in a way that's phased in, but I'm concerned that by putting the pause in place, we essentially are constraining ourselves from learning what we want to learn. We're not the other cities, so we need to make sure it works for us. But I am concerned that I don't hear a roadmap of here's how we're going to get the regulations passed. Here's the next step we're going to take in any concrete way.
So the regulations do not need to take a long time. We've drafted much of it. And again, part of the definitional pieces of what's in the law, craft sort of what then goes in there. Other cities that have multiple operators in the same place, we know of one. There might be one, some others, but this is not something that's happening in many places. We can learn from them too. So what's happening while we're piloting one, we're actually having conversations with the jurisdictions that have larger and multiple, and we're learning from them. And that will help us inform. But there are no rules of the sidewalk. There are rules of the road already. Now, people may or may not comply with it, but those exist. The sidewalk doesn't have it. And so this is different than the road. And this is the first time for us. And we want to get it straight. Pedestrians are the most vulnerable road users we have. And so this is not something where I want to learn after it knocks over a pedestrian or it does bang into the wheelchair. We've seen that happen. So yes, I am being very cautious and careful, but it doesn't mean that we're sitting on our hands. We are piloting in a small zone. We're learning from other cities that have examples of things that we want to understand better. And I think that that will help refine the regs. So we can move it forward, but no, I'm not going to say, let's just come one, come all and see what happens. And that worked better in, although some may argue, on the, the DoorDash or Uber Eats scenarios, but I think we have to be more deliberative and cautious.
I am okay being deliberative. I'm okay being thoughtful. I don't want us to, again, just not allow us to make progress and to evaluate this. So I would like to see us move forward with regulations. I'd like to work with you to make that happen. And if we're testing devices that frankly aren't going to be the industry standard, I'm concerned it doesn't actually tell us what we need to know. And that's why the pause feels like it's actually constraining our ability to learn what we want to learn. I don't want a Wild West any more than you want a Wild West. I do, though, want to make sure we're learning to say, does this make sense? How would it operate safely and effectively? Could it work? The findings may come back and tell us, no, it's not. But I don't think we're actually piloting the most effective model if we're going to constrain ourselves to less than 90 pounds, the models that fit a 2018 model of this, but they don't fit a 2026 model of where we are today or where it looks like things are going to be going. And so I don't want us to fear failure when it comes to looking at innovation. Be smart about it, pilot it, learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you on that 100%. I just don't think we're actually learning what we could be learning from this.
Right.
And that's
and
what I want us to do.
Well, and
I'd love to follow up with you and your team and talk through what our roadmap looks like and what we've learned so far and what the other questions are that we're trying to answer and how we're closing out on those questions. Because we do have a plan and we do want to understand more and I think have a threshold before we get more comfortable. And we'll tell you what that is. And when we get there, and that can be something we talk about iteratively as we continue to get more information. But I think we're on the path to move it forward. I just want to be clear that there are many questions that we still need to have answered before we're willing to just open things up.
Got it. Okay, let's move on to curbside management. In your testimony, one of the things you talked about, the bill, the way you phrased it was the bill would not give you authority to enter into a franchise agreement that permits revenue sharing. I read it a little differently, where it just permits DDOT to enter into the agreement. Am I hearing you correct that you feel like we need to have more explicit language to allow revenue sharing? Like, are you reading that language in a way that while it doesn't explicitly state it, it also doesn't preclude it? Am I hearing you correctly? You would rather it specifically state it to make sure it's clear what DDOT could do in terms of entering that type of agreement?
Right. I mean, the current language now allows us to move forward on a procurement, right? Which really, we don't need legislation to do that. We could do that on our own. If we want to do something different, we don't have a budget in FY26 for this work, right? And so to do a standard procurement where we would pay for everything upfront, we don't have a path to move forward for that reason alone. If we wanted to try something different in terms of making it more of a revenue sharing model, I know you want to move quickly. We would need legislation to do it, but this legislation does not enable that.
Okay. I'm not against the revenue sharing concept. It's just I read the language as permissive, but I'm hearing you say your team is reading it as not explicitly allowing it. And it sounds like you would prefer to have it explicitly allow it, which in my mind, it doesn't preclude it. And I'm not opposed to specifically citing it. I just want to make sure I'm hearing your team's interpretation of this correctly, which is you'd rather it just explicitly state it rather than be silent to it.
Right. I mean, at this point, the legislation is an endorsement of the concept. It is an enthusiastic way to say, we think we should do it, the thing, and, with some timelines, right? But it is not allowing us, it doesn't enable us again to do anything different. And there are many challenges with moving forward with a project like this, and legislation can be helpful. And I have shared this before and continue to say, we are learning a lot about what it takes to move forward on this. And I just also need to say, we are so enthusiastic about the potential benefits. And we are the first to say that there are some challenges at the curbside that we don't currently have the tools to really address. So are very excited about how we can rethink curbside management, and do think that legislative changes could be helpful. We think that there are things that probably are still needed, and would invite you and your team to, have some opportunities to talk through all of what those are. Because as it stands today, again, other than sort of having some timelines, which we do have a lot of concerns with, it doesn't really enable us to do anything that we can't currently do.
Okay. And maybe I'm wordsmithing this, but like the bill states DDOT may contract with a third-party vendor to implement the requirements of the law. I think that's broad enough for the kind of arrangement you're talking about from a revenue sharing perspective. I have no problem if we want to work together to tweak the language in a way that makes it just abundantly clear so that you feel like you've got that ability to move forward. I don't know the difference between if it's a franchise agreement, is it a contract, is it revenue sharing? We can work with your team on that. My point is, I read the law to be permissive of it right now. If we need to fine tune it a little bit so that your team has greater confidence in that, I'm fine to work with you on that.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Do you agree that we should be looking at this to focus on pilot implementation areas? I'm not quite sure what our correct terminology might be, but that we're going to have areas where it might make the most sense as we initially roll this out to target a handful of pilot areas to use this technology, learn from it before we adopt it more broadly into other commercial corridors?
Actually, I'm not quite sure doing this on a very small scale does make sense. Now, it should, where I sit today would be, this works and makes the most sense in dense, probably I would start with, commercial corridors. And the challenge would be that because it is such a big change, we would want to do a pretty significant educational outreach campaign about this to explain what it looks like, to go through that big effort for 3 segments. So we've piloted it in terms of camera use on a small segment, right? So we know the technology works. We know from other cities that it works on a broader level. So sort of proof of concept is kind of not, we don't need that at this stage. But I do think to roll it out in very limited locations where, and I'll give a very specific example. Right now, freight, when they are doing, for them to use to loading, they pay via a permit. One of the benefits of this, which I'm seeing as really frictionless payment, even easier than, putting out an app, would mean that we don't need those permits anymore, and that the freight trucks can pay for what they use. So that is a pretty significant change to kind of pair it out on a, paying by permit, eliminate the need for a permit, and then the trucks just through their license plate would just pay for what they use. To do that on a sort of very small scale, but I
Right,
think
may not be
be
work.
complicated,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know what that magic number is as a starting point, but it definitely would be more than a handful. And all of these are reasons why the 90 days for regulations and the 6 months for rollout make me very nervous. Even if we were to move forward with a franchise agreement, so we would not need to do a standard type of procurement where we have the money up front that we're paying for a service. That is still, a process. There's a solicitation. We get, we would have to do an evaluation. The requirements, the thing about this technology is that there really is there are a lot of a la carte options. So even understanding what would we want on a segment, I don't want it on just the 2 spots that would be for loading per se, right? We could have on an entire block segment, we would have a segment that could be 10-minute parking, short-term parking. Some might still be 2-hour parking. Some could be larger loading during the daytime hours. In the evening hours, be more, short-term parking. Defining what that would look like on every segment is going to take a little bit of effort. So the big thing that makes me nervous, it's not that there are sort of constraints in sort of the how to move forward. It is very broadly worded, but the time horizons are just not realistic in terms of all of the steps that we would need to do to operationalize this.
Okay. Based on our last conversation, though, you understand where I'm coming from of trying to be aggressive on regulations and getting those out. So I think your argument around the amount of energy it would take to do just a pilot zone or 2, and then also making it such that that same delivery driver isn't quite sure, am I in one of the zones? Am I not in one of the zones? Do I have to hop out and pay on this one, or it's automatic in this one? That does merit just a much more larger expanse of where to do that. And if the technology is being shown to work in other cities to where you can have confidence of the operations of it, I agree. That probably makes more sense because you want it to be, and as we heard Mr. Justice say, like the experience from other cities, the easier you can make it, don't overcomplicate it, the better. And sometimes we like to pilot things to death. Sometimes there's a reason for it. And sometimes it actually makes sense not to necessarily do it that way if you want a wholesale application to take place. Are there, one of the things that I think other cities have looked at is the flexibility or operational ability for these devices or technology to actually serve other functions as well. Is that something DDOT would be looking at as well, whether it be other types of automated enforcement or other types of beneficial tools that you would find?
Absolutely, but I'm going to say that the main appeal is sort of the benefits of how we can free up curbside for the intended use, and compliance with paying. I sort of differentiate compliance with enforcement, right? Enforcement, which I think people sort of point to as this is a money grab, these high fines and tickets. That to me is so secondary to the goal here. The goal here is behavior change. Our curbsides are messy. right now. We have, as everyone has pointed out, and as you know, was I think one of the generators for your interest, we have too much double parking, trucks blocking bike lanes. It causes additional traffic and congestion. The lack of compliance also means that we don't collect for just parking. I mean, if people are staying there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they don't even bother, right? Because even if it is a quick credit card swipe or a quick app, they figure for 10 minutes, why bother? Those little minutes add up, right? So it's never really about enforcement, getting big ticket and fines here. For me, this is really about the behavior change and just collecting what we should based on curbside use.
Yeah.
So
That to me is why this technology can be so successful, right? Is that oftentimes people veer towards, we just got to have really huge, hefty fines, and that's what will change behavior. The reality is it actually doesn't take much. You just need to have the certainty of it. And so I don't want to be separated from $5, let alone 50 or 500, right? And so if it's 10 cents for a quick pullover for a food driver, that's not deeply impactful, but it's an appropriate amount of saying this isn't free space. And so there's a cost there. And so I think that type of, you don't have to have huge prices. You can actually just have the certainty of it is what helps change behavior. The piece that I am concerned about is I think the number is probably 90% of people don't want to get a ticket. And when they do get a ticket, they change behavior. And then you got the other 10% that just aren't paying attention and don't care. And at least in DC, what we've seen without ticket reciprocity, that's exaggerated, certainly with Maryland and Virginia, where we are unable, when there is a violation, to be able to recover those costs. And so we see the examples of people with tens of thousands of dollars of speeding tickets, driving dangerous on our roads. And I think this is DDOT doing a lot of great work. I think the council's doing a lot of great work. The AG is doing a lot of great work. We're making progress, but that's one of my concerns about how we operationalize this and make it work so that we don't end up with the frequent flyers that are just not going to change behavior and then mess it all up for everybody else, whether that's as we heard, the wholesalers being able to, get their product to that restaurant and be able to deliver, whether it's a keg or the cases of wine or beer, whatever they're going to be doing, they can get that in, whether it's the food delivery driver, whether it's the patron of the restaurant. And so I'm concerned about that. I don't know if you have any thoughts around how we continue to work on that.
yes, and yes. And again, part of the challenge is that the freight delivery drivers face is that even when there are loading zones, ample size for their vehicles, when you have just a resident park there because they think it's going to be a 10-minute Starbucks run, that's why they're parking in the middle of the street. So we need to stop that. And I think even just the optics of having cameras will help. So I'm not saying that there shouldn't be enforcement ultimately, but that is not really the driver here. And I do think that, especially for the 10-minute spots, that, people will not leave it for the hour or two because they know that it will be cameras are 100% invisible. So we'll get there. But again, this is not about sort of gouging and leading with a stick. It's really about leading with it's frictionless payment. You will, like your Easy Pass, you get your license plate in the system and you're able to pay for the time used. And I do think that assists with all the other needs.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I mean, right now, a lot of people just see it as a roll of the dice. Probably not going to get a ticket, so I'm not going to do this. And to anybody who's cynically thinking it's a money grab, 10 cents is not a money grab.
Right.
It's paying for what you use. And I think that's what this holds a lot of possibility to be able to do. And then what our larger goal is not the money. It's to effectively use the curb space. Me, you, the city, very few ways in which we can actually increase curb space. It's about how do we use it more efficiently? How do we use it more effectively? How do we support our local businesses? How do we support our visitors, our residents? That's, I think, what this is in service of. And so I'm really excited about the potential and looking forward to working with you and your team to help think through how do we get this done? How do we make it so it can actually be deeply impactful? Because I think it will make business work better. I think it will help our residents work better if we're able to make this happen. And we can do it the right way.
Yes, indeed.
So I appreciate it. All right. I don't have any further questions. We have some follow-ups on all three bills. But I know we can follow up with you and your teams and for our public witnesses as well. But this is going to conclude the committee's public hearing on bills 26-244, 26-245, and 26-246. The record for today's hearing is going to close on October 30th, 2025, and the committee will accept written testimony through the council's hearing management system, which can be found on the council's website at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Thanks to everybody who joined us and had their input today. There being no further business for the committee, the time is now 12:34 p.m., and this public hearing of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is now adjourned. Thank you.